Victoria Sterling slammed a check on the table, half the amount she'd promised, and told Marcus Bennett he should be grateful she'd let him touch her jet at all. Marcus, a black single father who had just spent 30 days rebuilding a billion-dollar aircraft from wreckage, looked at the check, looked at her, and walked out without raising his voice. I didn't know that by tomorrow morning every pilot in her company would refuse to fly that jet, not because it was broken, but because of what she'd done to the man who fixed it. But that's not even the twist. What happened next forced one of the most powerful CEOs in American aviation to stand in front of her own board and admit she was wrong. Before you hear how, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss the rest of this story. Now let me take you back to where it all started. Marcus Bennett's alarm went off at 4:45 every morning. Not because anyone told him to, not because he had some fancy schedule or a personal assistant reminding him. He did it because his daughter Lily needed breakfast before the school bus came at 6:15, and Marcus refused to let her leave the house without a hot meal. That was the deal he'd made with himself 7 years ago, the day he buried his wife and stood in the cemetery holding a 2-year-old girl who didn't understand why her mother wasn't coming home. He'd made 3 promises that day. First, Lily would never go hungry. Second, Lily would never feel unloved. Third, he would never let the world turn him into something bitter. 7 years later, he was keeping all 3. He cracked eggs into a skillet. He buttered toast. He poured orange juice into a plastic cup with cartoon characters on it that Lily refused to give up, even though she was 9 now and probably too old for it. "Dad," Lily said, climbing into the kitchen chair with her backpack already on, "you look tired." "I'm always tired, baby girl. More tired than usual." Marcus smiled. She was sharp. Too sharp sometimes. "I got a big job coming up today. Might be the biggest one I ever had." Lily tilted her head. "Bigger than when you fixed Mr. Henderson's Cessna and he cried?" Marcus laughed. "Yeah, bigger than that." "Then you should eat breakfast too," Lily said, pushing a piece of toast toward him. He took it, not because he was hungry, because she needed to see him take care of himself the way he took care of her. That was the thing about being a single parent. You learned fast that your kid watched everything, every reaction, every decision, every moment you chose to stand up or sit down. Marcus drove Lily to the bus stop, watched her climb on, and waved until the bus turned the corner. Then he sat in his truck for a full minute. He didn't turn the engine on. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his glove compartment and read it one more time. It was a letter, hand-delivered 2 days ago by a man in a suit who looked like he'd never been to this side of town before. The letter was on cream-colored stationery with a gold-embossed logo at the top, Sterling Aviation Group. The letter was short, almost insultingly short. It said Sterling Aviation had a specialized aircraft restoration project that required unique technical expertise. It said Marcus had been recommended by an unnamed source. It asked him to report to Hangar 7 at Sterling's private airfield for an evaluation meeting. It didn't say please, it didn't say thank you. It read like a summons, not an invitation. Marcus had almost thrown it away. He'd left the aviation world 8 years ago. He'd walked away from a career that most engineers would kill for a career that had taken him from a community college in Baltimore to the top-rated structural repair facility in the entire eastern United States. He'd been the youngest certified airframe specialist in his company's history. He'd been the guy they called when nobody else could figure out what was wrong. He'd rebuilt aircraft that insurance companies had already written off as total losses. And then Rachel got sick. His wife, his best friend, the woman who'd believed in him before anyone else did, she got a diagnosis that turned their entire world upside down in the span of one afternoon. Marcus didn't hesitate. He left. He left the career, the reputation, the money, all of it. He came home. He took care of his wife. He held her hand through chemotherapy and radiation, and 3 different experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. He sold his tools to pay for her medication. He cashed out his retirement to keep the lights on. And when Rachel died, Marcus was left with a 2-year-old daughter, $43 in checking, and a set of skills that the world had already forgotten he had. He'd rebuilt his life slowly, got a job at a small aircraft repair shop owned by a man named Hank Dawson, a 70-year-old veteran who didn't care what Marcus looked like or where he came from. Hank cared about one thing: could you do the work? Marcus could do the work. For 7 years, Marcus fixed small planes, regional aircraft, and the occasional corporate jet that found its way to Hank's modest shop. He never complained. He never talked about who he used to be. He showed up, did the job, and went home to his daughter. But that letter from Sterling Aviation sat in his glove compartment like a stone in his shoe. He almost didn't go. He told himself it wasn't worth it. He told himself those people would take one look at him, a black man in worn jeans and a faded work shirt driving a truck with 200,000 miles on it, and decide he wasn't what they were looking for. He knew how the world worked. He'd been in enough rooms to understand what happened when someone who looked like him walked into a space built for people who didn't. But then he thought about Lily. He thought about the way she'd looked at him this morning and told him to eat breakfast. He thought about what it would mean if she grew up watching her father turn away from a challenge because he was afraid of how people might see him. He started the truck. Sterling Aviation's private airfield was exactly what Marcus expected. Money everywhere. Glass buildings that reflected the sky. Manicured lawns. Security gates with cameras that tracked his truck the moment he pulled off the highway. The guard at the gate looked at Marcus, then at his truck, then back at Marcus. "You lost?" "No," Marcus said. "I'm here for a meeting at Hangar 7. The guard squinted. "Name, Marcus Bennett." The guard checked his clipboard, checked it again, then picked up a phone and made a call. Marcus waited. He could feel the guard's eyes on him the entire time. "All right," the guard finally said, his tone shifting just slightly. Not friendlier, just more careful. "Go ahead. Hangar 7 is the large building at the end. Park in the visitor lot." Marcus drove past rows of private jets lined up like luxury cars in a dealership. Gulfstreams, Bombardiers, a Dassault Falcon that probably cost more than every house on his entire street combined. He parked his truck between a Mercedes and a Tesla. It looked like a joke someone had arranged on purpose. He got out, grabbed his work bag, a canvas duffel that Rachel had given him 15 years ago, and walked toward the hangar. Inside the space was massive. Cathedral ceilings, polished concrete floors, LED lighting that made everything look like a showroom. And in the center of it all, raised on hydraulic lifts, was the jet, a Gulfstream G700. Even from 50 feet away, Marcus could see the damage. The fuselage had a massive impact zone along the lower left side. The wing root junction was visibly compromised. Landing gear housing was cracked. There were stress fractures running along the pressure hull like veins on the back of an old man's hand. Marcus stopped walking. He'd seen damage like this before, twice. Both times the aircraft had been scrapped. "You must be the mechanic." Marcus turned. A man in a perfectly tailored gray suit stood behind him. Early 40s, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. "I'm the engineer," Marcus said. The man's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Right. I'm Derek Whitmore, VP of Operations. Victoria is expecting you." Marcus followed Derek across the hangar floor. 3 other men in suits stood near a glass-walled conference room overlooking the main floor. They all turned to look at Marcus as he approached. He recognized the look. It was the same look the guard had given him, the same look he'd been getting his entire career. The look that said, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Marcus was sure. Derek opened the conference room door, and Marcus stepped inside. Victoria Sterling was sitting at the head of a long conference table. She was younger than he expected, mid-30s maybe. Dark hair pulled back tight, sharp eyes, no smile. She wore authority the way other people wore clothes. There were 4 other people in the room, 2 men and 2 women, all in business attire, all holding tablets or folders, all looking at Marcus like he'd walked into the wrong meeting. Victoria didn't stand up. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "thank you for coming on short notice." "It wasn't exactly short notice," Marcus said. "The letter didn't give a specific time. I chose this one." A small flicker crossed Victoria's face. Not quite surprise, more like recalibration. "Please sit down," she said. Marcus sat. Derek cleared his throat. "Mr. Bennett, as you may have seen, the aircraft in this hangar is a Gulfstream G700. It sustained severe structural damage during a ground incident 3 weeks ago. We've consulted with Gulfstream directly, 2 independent MRO facilities, and our own in-house engineering team. Every assessment has come back the same." "They said it can't be fixed," Marcus said. Derek paused. "How did you know that?" "Because I saw the aircraft on my way in, and I know what kind of damage makes people quit." Victoria leaned forward. "And what kind is that?" Marcus met her gaze. The kind that's fixable, but takes someone willing to do the work nobody else wants to do. The room went quiet. One of the women at the table, Marcus would later learn her name, was Sandra Chen, the company's chief financial officer, spoke first. "Mr. Bennett, we need to be transparent with you. This aircraft is scheduled for a critical international charter flight in 30 days. The client is one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East. The deal attached to this flight is worth approximately $400 million. If that aircraft is not airworthy and certified in 30 days, we lose the contract." "And you've been through everyone else," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. Sandra hesitated. "We've explored every available option." "That's a polite way of saying I'm the last resort." Another pause. Victoria's eyes hadn't moved from Marcus. "We were given your name by someone who used to work at your former company," Victoria said. "They said you were the best structural repair engineer they'd ever worked with. They also said you disappeared 8 years ago, and nobody knew why." Marcus didn't answer that. "Can you fix it?" Victoria asked, directly. No decoration. Marcus looked through the glass wall at the damaged aircraft. He studied the fuselage from where he sat. He looked at the wing root. He looked at the way the landing gear housing had shifted. "I need to do a full inspection before I can answer that," Marcus said. "But I'll tell you what I know from looking at it. That's not just cosmetic damage. Your pressure hull is compromised. Your structural longerons are probably bent or cracked. Your fuel system integrity is questionable. Whoever told you it can't be fixed wasn't being lazy, they were being honest." "So it can't be done," Derek said. "I didn't say that," Marcus replied. "I said they were being honest about the difficulty. There's a difference between impossible and extremely difficult. Most people can't tell the difference. That's why they quit." Victoria studied him for a long moment. "What would you need?" she asked. "Full access to the aircraft. A complete set of Gulfstream maintenance manuals and structural repair documentation. Tooling appropriate for composite and metallic structural work. 24-hour access to this hangar. And I work alone." Derek almost laughed. "You want to repair a G700 alone? That's a $200 million aircraft. Our insurance requires—" "I'll sign whatever liability waiver your lawyers need," Marcus said. "But I work alone. I don't work with people looking over my shoulder, second-guessing every decision I make. Either you trust me to do this, or you don't." Derek looked at Victoria. Victoria didn't look at Derek. She was still watching Marcus. "What about compensation?" Sandra asked. "We'll need to agree on terms." "My rate is standard industry rate for Level 3 structural repair on a large cabin aircraft. You can look it up. I don't negotiate my rate because my rate is fair." "Our budget for this project," Sandra began. "Your budget is your problem," Marcus said. "My rate is my rate. If the rate is too high, find someone else. But you already tried that." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that happens when everyone in a room realizes they're not in control of the conversation the way they thought they were. Victoria made her decision fast. That was one thing Marcus would later admit he respected about her. She didn't waste time pretending to think about things she'd already decided. "Give him what he needs," she said to Derek. "Full access, full documentation, 24 hours. Derek nodded. He didn't look happy about it. Victoria stood up and extended her hand to Marcus. Marcus shook it. Her grip was firm, practiced, the kind of handshake that had closed 1,000 deals. 30 days, she said. 30 days, Marcus repeated. He didn't smile. She didn't smile. They understood each other, not as allies, not as enemies, as two people who both knew exactly what was at stake and exactly how much the other person was risking. Marcus left the conference room and walked back to the hangar floor. He set his canvas bag down next to the aircraft and looked up at the damage one more time. He pulled out his phone and called Hank Dawson. "Hank, it's Marcus." "I know who it is. Caller ID exists. What happened?" "I took the job." Hank was quiet for a moment. "The Sterling job." "Yeah. That aircraft is destroyed, Marcus. I saw the report. A buddy at the FAA showed me the preliminary. It's not destroyed, it's damaged. There's a difference." Hank sighed, the heavy sigh of a man who'd spent 50 years in aviation and knew what damaged really meant. "You sure about this?" "No," Marcus said honestly, "but I'm going to do it anyway." "Your girl okay with this? 30 days is a long time." "She told me to eat breakfast this morning." Hank laughed softly. "Smart kid. She gets that from her mama." Marcus felt the sting of that. He always felt the sting. It never went away. You just learned to keep moving through it. "I'm going to need you to cover my jobs at the shop," Marcus said. "Already figured that. Go fix that airplane, son." And Marcus, yeah, don't let those people make you feel small. You hear me? Don't let them do that. Marcus put his phone in his pocket and looked up at the jet one more time. Then he got to work. The first 3 days were inspection only. Marcus didn't pick up a single tool. He spent 60 hours climbing over, under, around, and through every section of the aircraft, with a flashlight, a mirror, a borescope, and a notebook. He mapped every crack, every stress fracture, every compromised rivet, every delaminated composite panel. He documented everything with photographs, measurements, and hand-drawn diagrams that would have impressed any engineering professor in the country. On day 3, Derek Whitmore showed up at the hangar at 7 in the morning. Marcus had been there since 4. "How's it going?" Derek asked, trying to sound casual. "I haven't started yet," Marcus said without looking up from his notebook. "What do you mean you haven't started? You've been here for 3 days. "I've been inspecting for 3 days. Inspection isn't repair. If you don't understand the damage, you can't fix it. You can only hide it, and hidden damage kills people." Derek stiffened. "Are you suggesting our in-house team missed something?" Marcus looked up. "I'm suggesting that your in-house team looked at this aircraft and saw a problem they wanted to go away. I'm looking at it and seeing an aircraft that needs someone to listen to it. Listen to it. Every aircraft talks to you if you pay attention. The metal tells you where it's stressed. The composites tell you where they've been overloaded. The rivets tell you where the structure has shifted. You just have to know how to listen." Derek stared at him. "That's not how we typically describe structural analysis. That's why your team couldn't fix it." Derek left. Marcus went back to work. On day 4, he made a call to Victoria directly. He'd been given her number for emergencies only, but he considered this an emergency. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Bennett, I've completed my full inspection. I can fix this aircraft, but I need to tell you something first." "Go ahead." "The damage is worse than your preliminary reports indicated. Your lower fuselage longerons aren't just cracked. 3 of them are deformed beyond simple repair. Your wing root attachment fittings have microfractures that weren't caught because your team used standard NDT methods instead of phased array ultrasonic. And your aft pressure bulkhead has a stress pattern that tells me this aircraft had pre-existing fatigue damage before the ground incident even happened." The line was quiet for several seconds. "What does that mean?" Victoria asked. "It means someone was already cutting corners on maintenance before I got here. It means this aircraft had problems that nobody wanted to talk about. And it means the repair is going to be more complex than anyone estimated. Can you still do it in 30 days? "Yes, but the cost will be higher than we discussed." "How much higher?" Marcus gave her a number. It was precise, not inflated, not negotiable. It reflected exactly the scope of work required. Victoria paused. "That's significant. So is the $400 million deal you'll lose if the jet doesn't fly?" Another pause. "Approved," Victoria said. "Keep me updated." She hung up. No goodbye. No thank you. Marcus noticed. He got back to work. Days 5 through 15 were the hardest. Marcus worked 18-hour shifts, sometimes 20. He fabricated replacement longerons by hand using aluminum alloy stock that he'd specified down to the exact heat treatment batch. He removed damaged composite panels and laid up new ones using vacuum bag techniques that required precision measured in thousandths of an inch. He replaced over 300 rivets, each one drilled, deburred, and driven by hand because machine-driven rivets didn't give him the tactile feedback he needed to know the joint was right. Every night he called Lily. "Dad, when are you coming home?" "Soon, baby girl. I'm almost done with the hard part." "You always say that." "I know, but this time it's almost true. Mrs. Patterson said I could stay at her house on Friday because you work late. She's going to make pot roast." "That's nice of her. Tell her I'll bring her something when this is over." "Dad, yeah, are the people being nice to you?" Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to lie to his daughter, but he didn't want to burden her with the truth either. "They're being professional," he said. "That doesn't sound the same as nice." "It's not, but that's okay. I'm not there to make friends. I'm there to do a job." "But you deserve friends too, Dad." Marcus closed his eyes. Rachel used to say that. Exact same words. "You deserve friends too, Marcus." "I know, Lily. I'll be home soon." He hung up and went back into the hangar. At night, alone with the aircraft, Marcus worked with a focus that bordered on meditation. Every bolt he torqued, every seal he installed, every structural component he aligned. He did it with the understanding that someone's life would depend on it. That was the thing about aircraft repair that most people never understood. It wasn't about metal and rivets and composites. It was about trust. Every person who boarded that aircraft would be trusting that the person who built it did their job right. Marcus didn't take that lightly. He never had. On day 12, something happened that almost broke him. I was working under the fuselage when he heard voices above him on the hangar floor. Two of Victoria's executives. He recognized Derek's voice, and another man he'd met briefly named Thomas were talking near the aircraft without knowing Marcus was underneath it. "How much longer on this thing?" Thomas asked. "The mechanic says another 18 days. The mechanic, what's his name again? Bennett, Marcus Bennett. And we're really trusting a guy from some backyard shop to rebuild a G700. I mean, look at this situation, Derek. We've got a $200 million aircraft being worked on by a guy who drives a pickup truck older than my intern." Derek laughed. Low, uncomfortable, but he laughed. "Victoria signed off on it," Derek said. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to make sure our liability is covered. Because if that thing goes up and something fails, nobody's going to blame us for hiring a real firm. They're going to blame us for hiring this guy. This guy has credentials. I don't care about credentials. I care about optics. How does it look that Sterling Aviation's flagship jet was rebuilt by someone nobody's ever heard of, a black guy from a no-name shop? Come on, Derek. You know how this works." Marcus lay under the aircraft and didn't move. He stared up at the belly of the fuselage he was rebuilding with his own hands, and listened to two men in suits decide that his skin color mattered more than his work. He'd heard it before, 1,000 times, in different words in different rooms from different mouths. But the words always carried the same weight. You don't belong here. Marcus wanted to slide out from under the aircraft and confront them. He wanted to stand up and ask Thomas to explain exactly what optics meant. He wanted to ask Derek why he'd laughed, but he didn't. Not because he was afraid, because he knew that the best response he could give was the aircraft itself. When it was done, when it was perfect, the work would speak louder than anything he could ever say. He went back to work. That night, he didn't call Lily. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for 45 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, breathing through something that was half rage and half grief. Then he drove home, checked on his sleeping daughter, and sat in the kitchen until 2 in the morning, staring at a photograph of Rachel. "I'm still keeping my promises," he whispered to the photograph. "All 3 of them." He went to bed. He set his alarm for 4:45. He got up and did it again. By day 20, the aircraft was transforming. Marcus had replaced the structural longerons. He'd rebuilt the wing root attachment points. He'd repaired the aft pressure bulkhead. He'd resealed every fuel cell and pressure boundary. He'd replaced the damaged landing gear housing and realigned the nose gear steering mechanism. The aircraft was more than repaired. It was better than it had been before the damage. Marcus knew this because he'd studied the original build specifications down to the last page, and in several areas he'd exceeded them, not because he was showing off, because the original specs had margins that Marcus didn't consider adequate for the stress profiles this aircraft would face. On day 22, Sterling Aviation sent in an independent inspection team, 3 FAA-certified inspectors. 2 of them had worked at Gulfstream. 1 had been an Air Force structural engineer. Marcus stood in the corner of the hangar while they inspected. He didn't hover. He didn't explain. He let the work speak. The lead inspector, a man named Patterson, no relation to Lily's neighbor, spent 6 hours going over the aircraft. He checked every repair. He ran every test. He used phased array ultrasonics, eddy current inspection dye, penetrant and visual examination. At the end of the day, Patterson walked over to Marcus. "How long have you been doing this work?" Patterson asked. 15 years total, 8 years off, 7 back. Patterson shook his head slowly. "I've been inspecting aircraft for 30 years, government, military, private sector. I've never seen structural work like this on a repair." Marcus said nothing. "Your longeron replacements are better than factory," Patterson continued. "Your composite layups are textbook. Your rivet patterns, who taught you to rivet like that? A man named Hank Dawson. Hank Dawson from Baltimore. You know him. He trained half the structural guys in the Mid-Atlantic. I should have known." Patterson paused. "This aircraft isn't just repaired, Mr. Bennett. It's rebuilt, to a higher standard than it was manufactured." Marcus felt something rise in his chest. Pride. the kind of pride that doesn't need an audience. "I'm going to sign off on the airworthiness certification today," Patterson said. "But I want you to know something. I'm going to note in my report that this is the finest structural repair I've inspected in my career. I want that on record." Marcus extended his hand. Patterson shook it. "Thank you," Marcus said. "Don't thank me. Thank whoever taught you to care this much about doing it right." Marcus thought about Hank. He thought about Rachel. He thought about Lily asking him if the people were being nice. "I will," Marcus said. Day 28, 2 days ahead of schedule. Marcus had completed every repair, every system check, every documentation requirement. The aircraft was ready. He'd worked over 500 hours in 28 days. He'd lost 12 pounds. He had bags under his eyes that made him look 10 years older. His hands were cut and calloused and stained with sealant and primer. But the aircraft was perfect. He called Victoria's office to report completion. Derek answered. "She's in a meeting. I'll relay the message. Tell her the aircraft is done, 2 days early. Full documentation package is ready for review." "That's impressive. I'll let her know." Marcus waited for something more. A thank you, maybe. An acknowledgement that he'd done what everyone said couldn't be done. Derek hung up. Marcus packed his tools into his canvas bag. He cleaned his work area. He took one last walk around the aircraft, running his hand along the fuselage, the way you might run your hand along a horse after a long ride. "You're good," he whispered to the aircraft. "You're better than good." Then he sat down in the hangar and waited for someone to come tell him what happened next. The meeting happened on day 29. Marcus was called to the same conference room where this had all started. Victoria was there, Derek was there, Sandra Chen was there, Thomas was there, the man who'd talked about optics. 2 other people Marcus hadn't met before were also present, lawyers by the look of them. Victoria started talking before Marcus even sat down. "The inspection team has certified the aircraft. We're ahead of schedule. The client has confirmed the charter date." Marcus nodded. "Good. There is, however, an issue with the final compensation." Marcus felt something shift inside him, a cold weight settling into his stomach. "What issue?" he asked. Sandra opened a folder. "Mr. Bennett, when we agreed to terms, the projected scope of work was based on preliminary damage assessments. You subsequently informed us that the damage was more extensive and requested an increase in compensation, which was verbally approved by Ms. Sterling." "That's correct. However, upon review, our finance team has determined that the adjusted figure exceeds our budgeted allocation for this project. Additionally, several line items in your billing, specifically the additional hours logged during the inspection phase and the premium material sourcing, are being flagged for review." Marcus stared at her. "Flagged for review?" "Yes, we'd like to propose an adjusted final payment." Sandra slid a piece of paper across the table. Marcus looked at the number. It was less than 60% of what they'd agreed to. It was less than what he would have earned at Hank's shop doing routine maintenance for the same number of hours. The room was silent. Marcus looked from Sandra to Derek. Derek looked at the table. He looked at Thomas. Thomas looked at his phone. He looked at the 2 lawyers. They looked at their folders. Then he looked at Victoria. She was watching him. Her face was unreadable. Is this your decision?" Marcus asked her directly. Victoria didn't flinch. "The finance team has made a recommendation that I've reviewed and approved." "A recommendation," Marcus repeated. "You approved it." "The numbers are the numbers, Mr. Bennett." Marcus picked up the paper. He looked at it one more time. Then he set it back down. "I rebuilt your aircraft," he said. His voice was steady, not loud, not angry, steady. "I rebuilt it in 28 days. I found pre-existing damage that your own team missed, damage that could have caused a catastrophic failure in flight. I worked 500 hours. I missed 3 weeks of my daughter's life. I did everything I said I would do, and I did it better than anyone expected." Nobody spoke. "And now you're telling me that my work is worth 60% of what you promised. Not because the work was inadequate, not because I failed, but because your finance team decided that an independent mechanic from a small shop doesn't have the leverage to fight back." Sandra started to respond. "Mr. Bennett, "I'm not finished," Marcus said, still steady, still calm. I took this job because I believed my work mattered. I believed that if I did exceptional work, I would be treated with basic fairness. I never asked for special treatment. I never asked for charity. I asked for what was agreed." He stood up. "I repaired your aircraft because I believed my work mattered. I never thought I would have to fight to prove that my time mattered too." He picked up his canvas bag. He walked to the door. Victoria called after him. "Mr. Bennett, I'd encourage you to reconsider. This offer is more than fair given the circumstances." Marcus stopped. He didn't turn around. "Fair," he said. "You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means." He walked out of the conference room. He walked across the hangar floor past the jet he had rebuilt with his own hands. He walked into the parking lot. He got into his truck. He sat there for a long time. Then he drove home to his daughter. He didn't cry. He wanted to. But he was a man who'd buried his wife at 28 and raised a daughter alone in a world that consistently told him he wasn't enough. He'd run out of tears a long time ago. He still had something, though. He still had his dignity. And in 36 hours, every pilot at Sterling Aviation was going to learn exactly what Victoria Sterling had done to the man who saved her billion-dollar jet. Not because Marcus told them, because the truth has a way of finding wings. Marcus pulled into his driveway at 7:43 that evening. The porch light was on. Mrs. Patterson's car was parked along the curb, which meant Lily was inside doing homework or watching television or doing whatever 9-year-old girls did when their fathers were too busy saving other people's airplanes to be home. He sat in the truck for a full 2 minutes before going inside. He needed to put his face on. The face that said everything was fine. The face that said Dad handled it. The face that Lily needed to see because she was too young to carry the weight of what had just happened in that conference room. He walked through the front door. "Dad?" Lily ran from the kitchen table and threw her arms around his waist. She squeezed hard the way kids squeeze when they've been counting the days. Mrs. Patterson, a heavy-set woman in her 60s, who lived 3 houses down and had been helping with Lily since Rachel died, stood up from the couch. "She ate dinner," Mrs. Patterson said, "did her math homework, fought me on the reading assignment but got through it." "Thank you, Gloria. I owe you." "You don't owe me a thing, Marcus. You never have." She gathered her purse and her jacket and stopped at the door. "You look thin." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're thin and you look like you haven't slept in a month. Eat something tonight. Promise me." "I promise." She gave him a look that said she didn't believe him, then left. Lily pulled Marcus to the kitchen table where her homework was spread out. Math worksheets, a reading log, a half-finished drawing of an airplane that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Is the airplane done?" Lily asked. "It's done." "Did they like it?" Marcus sat down across from her. He picked up the drawing she'd been working on. It was a jet rough, the proportions off the way a 9-year-old's drawing would be, but she'd added details. Windows, an engine, landing gear. She'd been paying attention all those years he'd brought her to Hank's shop. "They liked the airplane," Marcus said carefully. "The airplane turned out perfect." "Then why do you look sad?" He put the drawing down. "I'm not sad, Lily. I'm just tired." "You always say you're tired when you're sad. Mom used to say the same thing." Marcus looked at his daughter. 9 years old, and she could read him like a book. Rachel's eyes, Rachel's stubbornness, Rachel's refusal to let anyone hide from the truth. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements about things," Marcus said, "about what's fair and what's not. And sometimes those disagreements don't get resolved the way you want them to." Lily thought about this. Like when Tyler Jackson said he'd trade me his good markers for my stickers, and then he only gave me the dried-up ones. Marcus almost laughed. "Yeah, Lily, kind of exactly like that. Mrs. Rodriguez made him give me the good ones. She said a deal is a deal." "Well, Mrs. Rodriguez sounds like a smart woman. So who's going to make them give you the good ones, Dad?" Marcus didn't have an answer for that. He kissed the top of her head, told her to brush her teeth, and sat alone in the kitchen after she went to bed. He looked at the drawing of the airplane one more time. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his wallet right behind the photograph of Rachel he'd carried for 7 years. I didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room in the dark, thinking about 500 hours of work, about the feel of every rivet under his fingers, about Patterson the inspector saying it was the finest repair he'd ever seen, and about Victoria Sterling looking him in the eye and telling him 60% of his agreed payment was more than fair. Marcus had been disrespected before. He'd been overlooked, underestimated, talked about behind his back, and treated like he didn't belong in rooms he'd earned the right to stand in. That was the tax. The invisible tax that came with his skin and his background and his zip code. He'd been paying it his whole life. But this was different. This wasn't a slight or a snub or a sideways comment. This was a woman looking at his work that she knew was exceptional work that saved her company and deciding that he didn't have the power to fight back, so she didn't have to keep her word. That wasn't disrespect. That was theft. And Marcus Bennett, for all his patience, for all his quiet dignity, for all the promises he'd made over Rachel's grave, he could not let theft stand. Not for himself. For Lily. For every person who would ever be told that their work didn't matter because of who they were or where they came from. He just didn't know yet what he was going to do about it. As it turned out, he didn't have to do anything. The truth did the work for him. Captain James Whitfield had been flying for 31 years. He'd started in the Navy, transitioned to commercial aviation, and spent the last decade flying private charter for high-net-worth clients through a network of aviation companies, Sterling Aviation being one of the largest. Whitfield was 62 years old, had a grandson who wanted to be a pilot, and had never once in his career refused to fly an aircraft that had been certified airworthy. Until now. It started with paperwork. Routine paperwork, the kind of thing that happens before every flight and that most passengers never think about. 2 days after Marcus walked out of Sterling Aviation, the restored G700 was scheduled for its pre-charter certification flight, a test flight to verify all systems before the actual client charter. Whitfield had been assigned as captain. His co-pilot was a woman named Rena Desai, 44, former Air Force, one of the sharpest pilots in the private aviation circuit. Whitfield arrived at the hangar at 6 in the morning. He did what he always did. He pulled the aircraft's maintenance records, the repair documentation, and the airworthiness certification. He sat down at a table in the pilot's lounge with a cup of coffee and began reading. He read Patterson's inspection report first. His eyebrows went up. He read it again. "Rena," he called across the lounge, "come look at this." Desai walked over, coffee in hand. "What?" "Read Patterson's inspection summary." Desai read it. She looked up. "Finest structural repair in his career. Patterson doesn't say things like that. I've seen his reports. The man writes like a robot." "Keep reading. Look at the certification number on the repair sign-off." Desai scanned the document. She found the number. She frowned. "I don't recognize this cert number. It's not from any of the major MRO facilities. It's an independent engineer, individual certification." Whitfield pulled up the FAA registry on his tablet and entered the number. The name that came back was Marcus A. Bennett. Whitfield stared at the screen. Then he leaned back in his chair. "I'll be damned," he said. "You know him?" Desai asked. "I know of him. Marcus Bennett used to be at Chesapeake Structural Aviation in Baltimore, best outfit on the East Coast for heavy structural repair. I was their top guy. Then he disappeared, 7-8 years ago. Nobody knew what happened to him. Some people said he retired. Some people said he got poached by a military contractor. Nobody had a straight answer. And he repaired this G700. According to Patterson's report, he didn't just repair it, he improved it." Desai sat down. "Okay, so what's the problem if Patterson signed off and the FAA cert is valid, we're good?" Whitfield didn't answer right away. "I was reading something else now." A set of internal Sterling Aviation emails that had been attached to the project file, billing correspondence, administrative notes, the kind of documents that usually meant nothing but sometimes meant everything. He read slowly. His face changed. "Jim," Desai said. "What is it?" Whitfield turned the tablet to face her. "Read the compensation correspondence." Desai read. Her expression went from neutral to confused to something that looked a lot like anger. "They cut his pay," she said. "They agreed to a figure. He completed the work ahead of schedule above specification, and then they cut his pay by over 40%. On what grounds? Budget review, line item flags, corporate language for, 'We decided to pay you less because we can.'" Desai set her coffee down. "That's not right." "No, it's not." They sat in silence for a moment. The hangar was quiet around them. The G700 sat on the floor behind the glass, gleaming under the lights, looking like a brand new aircraft, because it basically was. Marcus Bennett had made it one. Whitfield stood up. He walked to the window overlooking the hangar floor. He looked at the aircraft for a long time. "You know what holds an airplane together, Rena?" Rivets and prayers, as she said. It was an old aviation joke. Whitfield didn't laugh. Trust. Trust holds an airplane together. I trust the mechanic who inspected the landing gear. I trust the avionics tech who calibrated the instruments. I trust the fueler who filled the tanks. I trust the engineer who signed off on the structural integrity. Every single flight is an act of faith in people I've never met. I know that, Jim. If this company can take a man who did exceptional work that Patterson called the best he's ever seen and cut his pay because they know he doesn't have the resources to fight back, what does that tell you about this company? Desai was quiet. It tells me they don't value the people who keep these aircraft safe, Whitfield continued. And if they don't value the people, they don't value the work. And if they don't value the work, then eventually, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, eventually they're going to cut a corner that gets someone killed. Jim, the aircraft is certified. Patterson signed off. It's safe to fly. I know it's safe. I'm not questioning Bennett's work. I'm questioning this company's character. And I am not going to fly for a company that treats the people who build these aircraft like they're disposable. He picked up his headset from the table. He held it for a moment. Then he set it back down. I'm declining this flight, Whitfield said. Desai stared at him. Jim, this is a pre-charter cert flight for a $400 million deal. If you decline, I know what it is, and I know what it means, but some things matter more than a paycheck, Rena. If I fly this aircraft knowing what they did to the man who saved it, I'm telling them that it's okay, that they can treat people like that and the rest of us will just go along with it. He walked toward the door. Jim, Desai called after him. He stopped. I'm declining too, she said. Whitfield looked back at her. He nodded once, just once, but it carried the weight of everything he couldn't say. They walked out of the pilot's lounge together. Within an hour, Derek Whitmore's phone rang. It was the flight operations coordinator. We have a problem, she said. Captain Whitfield and First Officer Desai have both declined the G700 cert flight. Derek nearly dropped his coffee. What do you mean declined, on what grounds? They didn't cite safety concerns. They cited ethical objections. Ethical objections? What does that even mean? Get me another crew. I'm trying, but Whitfield made some calls. Derek felt something cold crawl up his spine. What kind of calls? The kind that spread. By noon, 3 more pilots had declined assignments to the G700. By end of business that day, the number was 7. By the following morning, it was 12. Every single one of them cited the same reason. Not safety, not mechanical concerns, not scheduling conflicts. They refused to fly the aircraft because of how Sterling Aviation had treated the man who rebuilt it. Derek burst into Victoria's office at 9:15 that morning without knocking. We have a situation, he said. Victoria looked up from her desk. Close the door. Derek closed it. 12 pilots have refused the G700, including Whitfield, who's been flying for us for 9 years. Victoria's expression didn't change. Replace them. I've been trying. Every qualified pilot I've contacted has either declined outright or asked for details about the Bennett situation before committing. Word is out, Victoria. The entire private aviation community is talking about this. Talking about what exactly? About the fact that we stiffed the engineer who rebuilt our flagship aircraft. That's the version going around. Victoria leaned back in her chair. We didn't stiff anyone. We adjusted the compensation based on a legitimate budget review. Our finance team. Victoria, I don't care what our finance team says. I care about the fact that we cannot get a crew for the G700. The charter is in 5 days. If we don't have a certified crew by then, the client walks. $400 million walks out the door. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Sandra Chen. Sandra, I need you in my office, now. Sandra arrived 3 minutes later. Derek explained the situation. Sandra frowned. The pilots are refusing on ethical grounds. That's not a recognized category for flight refusal. We could pursue breach of contract. They're independent contractors, Sandra. Most of them fly for multiple companies. They're not refusing under contract. They're simply choosing not to accept the assignment. There's nothing to breach. Then we find new pilots. We've been trying, Derek said. The problem is that private aviation is a small world. Everyone knows everyone. Whitfield has been in this industry for 30 years. He has relationships with every major pilot network on the East Coast. When he talks, people listen. Victoria stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the airfield. The G700 sat in its hangar gleaming and perfect and absolutely useless without a crew. What exactly are they saying about us? Victoria asked. Derek hesitated. Tell me, Derek. They're saying Sterling Aviation doesn't respect the people who keep aircraft safe. They're saying we used an independent engineer because no one else would take the job, and then we cheated him out of his pay because we could. They're saying the man who rebuilt the jet, a black single father running a small workshop, was treated like his work didn't matter. Victoria turned around. This is being framed as a race issue. It's being framed as a respect issue. The race part is just a detail that makes the story worse for us. It's not about race, Victoria. Derek's voice was firm in a way she'd never heard from him. With all due respect, it doesn't matter what it's about to us. It matters what it looks like to everyone else, and right now it looks terrible. Victoria sat back down. She pressed her fingers against her temples. Get Whitfield on the phone, she said. He won't take your call. I already tried. Then find someone who can reach him. The only person Whitfield wants to hear from is Marcus Bennett, and Bennett hasn't returned any calls from this company since he walked out of this building. Victoria stared at Derek for a long moment. You're telling me that a mechanic from a small shop has more influence over my pilots than I do. He's not a mechanic, Derek said quietly. He's an engineer. And yes, right now he has more credibility with the people who fly your aircraft than you do. Sandra shifted in her chair. There might be another option. We could reach out to Bennett directly, offer to renegotiate the compensation. You mean pay him what we originally agreed to pay him, Derek said. Sandra looked uncomfortable. Possibly. That's not renegotiation, Sandra. That's admitting we were wrong. The room went silent. Victoria looked at both of them. Get out, both of you. I need to think. They left. Victoria sat alone in her office for 45 minutes. She made no calls. She sent no emails. She stared at the wall where a framed photograph hung her father, Richard Sterling, the man who had built Sterling Aviation from nothing. He was standing next to a small propeller plane, smiling grease on his hands. He'd been a mechanic once, before the company, before the money, before the empire. He'd been a man who fixed aircraft with his own hands. Victoria hadn't thought about that in years. The story broke publicly the next day. It started with a post on an aviation industry forum, a community where pilots, mechanics, engineers, and aviation professionals shared news, discussed technical issues, and occasionally aired grievances. Someone nobody ever confirmed who posted a detailed account of what had happened at Sterling Aviation. The post didn't name Marcus directly, but it described the situation with enough specificity that anyone in the industry could connect the dots. Within hours, the post had hundreds of responses. Aviation professionals from across the country weighed in. Some defended Sterling, arguing that compensation disputes were normal business. But the overwhelming majority sided with the unnamed engineer. Then a reporter from Aviation Week picked up the story. She contacted Sterling Aviation for comment. She contacted the FAA. She contacted Patterson, the lead inspector, who confirmed on record that the repair work on the G700 was, in his words, extraordinary in quality and scope. She couldn't reach Marcus. He wasn't answering his phone. The article ran the following morning under the headline, Sterling Aviation Faces Pilot Revolt Over Independent Engineer Payment Dispute. By midday, the story had migrated from aviation trade press to mainstream business media. Bloomberg ran a segment. CNBC mentioned it in a panel discussion about corporate ethics. A commentator on cable news called it a textbook example of how not to treat the people who keep your business running. Sterling Aviation's stock dipped 2% before lunch. Victoria's phone started ringing with calls from board members. The first call was from Robert Langston, the longest-serving member of the board, and one of her father's original investors. Victoria, what the hell is going on? Langston said. No pleasantries. It's a compensation dispute that's been blown out of proportion by social media, and I don't care how it started. I care about how it ends. I've got 3 investors calling me asking whether we've lost our minds. The optics on this are catastrophic. Robert, the finance team conducted a legitimate review. The finance team doesn't fly airplanes, Victoria. Pilots fly airplanes. And right now, your pilots won't fly because they think you cheated a man who saved your aircraft. Whether you did or didn't is irrelevant at this point. The perception is the reality. I'm handling it. Handle it faster. The board is meeting tomorrow whether you call the meeting or not. He hung up. Victoria called Thomas next, the same Thomas who had talked about optics while Marcus lay under the aircraft listening. Thomas, I need damage control, PR strategy, talking points, something to get ahead of this.
Thomas was quiet for a beat too long. "Victoria, I've been talking to our PR firm. Their recommendation is straightforward." "What is it?"
Pay the man full original amount, issue a public statement acknowledging the error, and do it before the board meeting. That makes us look weak. Not paying him makes us look corrupt. Pick your poison. Victoria hung up and sat in silence again. She thought about something Marcus had said in the conference room, the last thing he'd said before he walked out. "Fair. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means." At the time, she'd dismissed it. She told herself he was being dramatic. She told herself that business was business and that compensation disputes happened every day. But sitting in her office watching her company's reputation unravel in real time, she was starting to wonder if Marcus Bennett understood something about fairness that she'd never learned. Meanwhile, Marcus was at home. He'd seen the news. Hank had called him 6 times. Friends had texted. A reporter from Aviation Week had left 3 messages on his voicemail. Marcus didn't return any of the calls. He sat at the kitchen table with Lily helping her with her science homework. They were studying simple machines, levers, pulleys, inclined planes. "Dad, what's a fulcrum?" Lily asked. "It's the point where a lever balances, where the force pivots." "Like a seesaw." "Exactly like a seesaw. The fulcrum is the middle part. The thing that makes it possible for a small push on one side to lift something heavy on the other side." "So a small thing can move a big thing." Marcus looked at his daughter. "Yeah, baby girl, a small thing can move a very big thing, if it's in the right place." The phone rang again. Marcus glanced at the caller ID, Sterling Aviation Corporate. He let it ring. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Lily asked. "Not tonight." "Is it the airplane people?" "Yeah. The ones who didn't give you the good markers." Marcus smiled, despite himself. "Yeah, those ones." Lily thought about it for a moment. Maybe they're calling to say sorry. Maybe. But if they are, they can wait until I'm done helping you with your homework. Some things are more important. Lily grinned. "Dad, you just said homework is more important than a phone call. I'm going to remember you said that forever." Marcus laughed. A real laugh. The first one in weeks. They finished the homework together. Marcus made grilled cheese sandwiches, Lily's favorite, and they ate at the kitchen table while she told him about a boy in her class who'd brought a frog to school and gotten in trouble. After dinner, Marcus put Lily to bed. He read her a chapter from a book about a girl who wanted to be an astronaut. Lily fell asleep before the chapter ended the way she always did. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed for a few minutes watching her breathe. "I did the right thing," he whispered. Not to Lily. Not to anyone in particular. Maybe to Rachel. Maybe to himself. "I did the right thing, and it cost me. But I did the right thing." He went back to the kitchen and picked up his phone. 23 missed calls, 14 text messages, 9 voicemails. He listened to one of the voicemails. It was from a man named James Whitfield, a captain he'd never met. "Mr. Bennett, my name is James Whitfield. I'm a pilot. I've been flying private charter for over 30 years. I reviewed the maintenance records on the G700 you rebuilt for Sterling Aviation. Patterson's report says your work is the finest he's ever inspected. I believe him. I also learned how Sterling treated you after the job was done. I want you to know that I refuse to fly that aircraft. Not because of anything wrong with your work. Your work is outstanding. I refused because a company that treats the people who keep aircraft safe the way they treated you is a company I won't fly for. Several other pilots feel the same. You don't know me, and you have no reason to trust me, but I want you to know you're not alone in this. Your work matters. You matter. If you ever want to talk, here's my number." Marcus played the message again, then a third time. He sat down at the kitchen table with the phone pressed against his chest and closed his eyes. For 7 years, he'd been invisible. A ghost from a previous life, working in a small shop, raising his daughter, asking nothing from the world except the chance to do honest work and be paid honestly for it. And now, because of a woman who decided his work wasn't worth what she'd promised the world was looking at him. I didn't want attention. He didn't want fame. He didn't want revenge. He wanted what Lily had described in her 9-year-old wisdom, the good markers, the ones he'd been promised. Nothing more, nothing less. The next morning, Hank Dawson showed up at Marcus's house at 7:30. He didn't call ahead. He just showed up the way old men from a different generation showed up when someone they cared about needed them. Marcus opened the front door and found Hank standing on his porch holding a paper bag from the diner down the street. "Brought you breakfast," Hank said. "Don't argue." Marcus let him in. They sat at the kitchen table. Hank had brought biscuits and gravy, Marcus's weakness, and 2 cups of coffee that were strong enough to strip paint. "You seen the news?" Hank asked. "I've seen it. Half the pilots on the East Coast are talking about you. My phone's been ringing since yesterday. People I haven't heard from in 10 years calling to ask if I know you. I told them you were the best structural engineer I ever trained, and that includes 3 guys who went to work for Boeing." Marcus picked at a biscuit. "I didn't ask for any of this, Hank." "I know you didn't. That's why it means something. You didn't make a scene. You didn't go on social media. You didn't hire a lawyer and hold a press conference. You just walked away. And the people who matter, the people who understand what this industry runs on, they saw it. What do you think I should do?" Hank sipped his coffee. "What do you want to do?" "I want to get paid what I'm owed, and I want to go back to fixing airplanes at your shop and raising my daughter." "Then hold your ground. Don't call them. Don't answer their calls. Don't make a statement. Don't do anything. Let them come to you." "And if they don't?" Hank smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd spent 50 years in aviation and understood exactly how the machinery of reputation worked. "They will," Hank said. "They don't have a choice. Every day that jet sits on the ground is a day their clients see an empty airplane and a broken promise. Every day those pilots refuse to fly is a day their reputation bleeds. You're not fighting Sterling Aviation, Marcus. You're not fighting Victoria Sterling. You're sitting still while they fight themselves." Marcus looked at his old mentor, the man who'd hired him when nobody else would, the man who'd taught him that every rivet mattered, that every seal was someone's life, that the work you did with your hands was the truest expression of who you were. "Hank, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Did you ever feel like the work wasn't enough? Like no matter how good you were, some people would never see past what you looked like?" Hank set his coffee down. He was quiet for a long time. Hank was white. He was 70 years old. He'd grown up in a different America. But he was also a man who had chosen decades ago to judge people by their hands and their hearts and nothing else. "I can't tell you I know what that feels like," Hank said, "because I don't. I've never walked into a room and had people assume I didn't belong there because of my skin. But I can tell you this, I've watched you walk into those rooms. I've watched you walk in, and I've watched people doubt you, and I've watched you prove them wrong every single time. Not with words, with work. That's who you are, Marcus. And the people who matter, the Pattersons, the Whitfields, the crews who fly these aircraft, they know it." Marcus nodded slowly. "Now eat your damn biscuits," Hank said. "You look like you lost 20 pounds in that hangar." Marcus ate. Back at Sterling Aviation, the situation was deteriorating by the hour. The board meeting happened at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Victoria sat at the head of the table. Robert Langston sat across from her. 8 other board members filled the remaining seats. Derek was there. Sandra was there. The company's general counsel, a man named Philip Drake, was there. Langston spoke first. "Victoria, the stock is down 3.5%. We've had inquiries from 4 major clients asking about the pilot situation. 2 European charter clients have requested meetings to discuss their contracts, and the Wall Street Journal is running a piece tomorrow morning." "What kind of piece?" Victoria asked. "The kind that uses the words corporate governance failure." Victoria's jaw tightened. "This is a compensation dispute with an independent contractor. It happens in every industry every day." "It doesn't happen every day with pilots refusing to fly and inspectors going on the record calling the contractor's work extraordinary," Langston said. "This is not a normal dispute, Victoria. This has become a symbol, and symbols are very expensive to fight." Another board member, a woman named Catherine Wells, leaned forward. "Victoria, I want to ask you something directly. Was the original compensation agreement with Mr. Bennett fair? It was reviewed by our finance. I didn't ask about the review. I asked about the original agreement. Was it fair?" Victoria paused. "It was within industry standards for the scope of work." "And the adjusted figure, the one you approved, was that fair?" Victoria didn't answer immediately. "Victoria," Catherine said, "I've known you since your father brought you to your first board meeting when you were 16 years old. You are one of the sharpest business minds I've ever worked with. But right now, I need you to answer me honestly. Was the adjusted figure fair?" The room waited. Victoria looked at Catherine. She looked at Langston. She looked at the faces around the table, faces she'd known for years, faces that had watched her grow from a teenager shadowing her father to the CEO of a billion-dollar company. "No," Victoria said quietly. "It wasn't fair." The room exhaled. "Then fix it," Langston said, "before this gets any worse." "It's not that simple anymore," Philip Drake, the general counsel, interjected. "If we reverse the compensation decision now, it looks like we were forced into it by public pressure. That sets a precedent. Every independent contractor we work with will know they can leverage public opinion against us." "Philip," Catherine said sharply, "a man did exceptional work for this company, and we tried to underpay him. The precedent we should be worried about is the one where we tell the world that Sterling Aviation doesn't keep its word." Drake raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "I'm just presenting the legal perspective." "The legal perspective," Langston said, "is that we're about to lose a $400 million charter contract because our pilots won't fly. Our reputation is being shredded in real time, and the man at the center of this entire situation is sitting at home in a modest house eating dinner with his 9-year-old daughter while we tear ourselves apart. Philip, sometimes the legal perspective needs to take a seat." Victoria stood up. Everyone looked at her. "I'll handle it," she said. "How?" Langston asked. "Personally." She left the boardroom. That evening, Victoria Sterling did something she hadn't done in years. She drove herself. No driver, no assistant, no security detail. She got in her car alone and drove 28 miles across the city to a neighborhood she'd never been to before. She found Marcus Bennett's house using the address from his contractor file. It was a small, single-story home on a quiet street. The yard was neat. A basketball hoop stood in the driveway, slightly tilted. The porch light was on. Victoria parked at the curb and sat in her car for several minutes. She could hear the faint sound of laughter from inside the house. She almost drove away. 3 times she almost started the engine and left. It would have been easier to send a lawyer, easier to send Derek, easier to send anyone but herself. But something held her there, something she couldn't quite name. She got out of the car and walked to the front door. She knocked. The laughter inside stopped. She heard footsteps. The door opened. Marcus stood in the doorway. He was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants. He had a dish towel over one shoulder. Behind him, Victoria could hear a child's voice asking who was at the door. Marcus looked at Victoria. His expression didn't change. No surprise, no anger, no satisfaction. He just looked at her the way you look at something you've been expecting. "Ms. Sterling," he said. "Mr. Bennett, I'm sorry to come to your home unannounced." "But you came anyway." "I did." They stood there for a moment. The evening air hung between them. "Dad?" Lily appeared behind Marcus, peering around his leg. "Who's that?" Marcus looked down at his daughter. "This is someone from the airplane company." Lily studied Victoria with the frank, unfiltered gaze that only children possessed. "Are you the one who didn't give my dad the good markers?" Victoria blinked. "I'm sorry." Marcus put his hand on Lily's shoulder. "Go finish your drawing, baby girl. I'll be right in." Lily gave Victoria one more look, a look that carried more judgment than any board meeting ever could, and disappeared back into the house. Marcus stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind him. "She's direct," Victoria said. "She gets it from her mother." They stood on the porch. Neither sat down. Neither moved to go inside. "I came because I owe you a conversation," Victoria said. "Not through lawyers, not through my VP, a conversation. You came because your pilots won't fly, and your board is breathing down your neck, and the Wall Street Journal is about to publish a story that makes your company look like it cheats working people." Victoria opened her mouth and then closed it. She wasn't accustomed to being spoken to that way. But she recognized something in Marcus's tone that stopped her from reacting. He wasn't attacking her. He was telling the truth, simply and directly. "The way you state a fact. That's part of it," she admitted, "but it's not all of it." "Then what's the rest?" Victoria paused. She looked at the basketball hoop in the driveway. She looked at the small house. She looked at the man standing in front of her, a man who had rebuilt her most valuable asset with his bare hands and asked for nothing more than what he'd been promised. "I saw the inspection report," she said. "I read every word of it. Patterson called your work the finest repair he's inspected in his career." "I know what he said." "I also pulled your old records, from Chesapeake Structural, your supervisor's evaluations, your certification history. You were extraordinary, Mr. Bennett. You were one of the best in the country, and you walked away from all of it." I walked away because my wife was dying. She needed me more than any airplane did." The words landed between them like stones dropped in still water. Victoria was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know that," she said. "You didn't ask. Nobody at your company asked me a single personal question the entire time I was there. Not one. In 28 days working 18-hour shifts in your hangar rebuilding your aircraft. Not one person asked me about my life, about my daughter, about why I left the industry, about anything. I was a tool to you, a tool you picked up when you needed it and tried to put back at a discount when you were done." Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was the uncomfortable recognition that someone was seeing her clearly, more clearly than she wanted to be seen. "You're right," she said. Marcus hadn't expected that. He'd expected her to argue, to justify, to explain. He'd been preparing for a fight. He wasn't prepared for agreement. "I'm not going to stand here and pretend that what happened was acceptable," Victoria continued. "It wasn't. The adjusted payment was wrong. I approved it because it was easier than pushing back against my own team. That's not leadership. That's cowardice." Marcus studied her face, looking for the performance, looking for the angle, looking for the corporate strategy underneath the words. He didn't find one. "What do you want, Ms. Sterling?" he asked. "I want to make it right. Full original payment, additional compensation for the delay, and your word that this can be resolved." "My word," Marcus said. "You're asking for my word after you broke yours." Victoria took the hit without flinching. "Yes, I'm asking for your word, because I've learned in the last 72 hours that your word means more in this industry than my entire legal department." Marcus leaned against the porch railing. He looked up at the sky. Stars were starting to come out. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking. "I don't want your money because you're embarrassed," Marcus said. "I want it because I earned it. There's a difference. If you're doing this to make the story go away, tell me now and I'll pass. I'm doing this because my father built this company with his own hands. He was a mechanic before he was a CEO. He would have been ashamed of what I did to you. And I'm doing this because a 9-year-old girl just looked at me and asked if I was the one who didn't give her father the good markers, and I didn't have an answer." Marcus almost smiled. "Almost." "I'll think about it," he said. "The charter flight is in 3 days." "Then I'll think fast." Victoria nodded. She turned to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Bennett, for what it's worth, your daughter is remarkable." "I know," Marcus said. "She gets that from her mother, too." Victoria walked back to her car. She didn't look back. Marcus watched her drive away. Then he went inside, sat down next to Lily at the kitchen table, and picked up a crayon. "What are we drawing?" he asked. "An airplane," Lily said. "A big one, like the one you fixed." "Okay, let's make it a good one." They drew together until Lily's bedtime. Marcus carried her to bed, tucked her in, and kissed her forehead. Then he went to the kitchen, picked up his phone, and called James Whitfield. "Captain Whitfield, this is Marcus Bennett. I got your message. Thank you for what you did. Thank you for what all of you did." "Mr. Bennett, you don't need to thank us. We did what was right." "I know. That's why I'm thanking you. Doing what's right is the hardest thing there is. Most people talk about it. You actually did it." "What happens now?" Whitfield asked. Marcus looked at the drawing on the kitchen table. Lily's airplane, big wings, bright colors, a sun in the corner with a smiley face. "Now," Marcus said, "we see if she means it." Marcus didn't sleep that night either. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Victoria's words on the porch. He'd been ready for a fight. He'd been ready for corporate language and legal threats, and the kind of polished intimidation that people with money used to make people without money feel small. He had not been ready for her to say, "You're right." That changed things. Not everything, but something. At 6 in the morning, he got up and made breakfast. Eggs, toast, orange juice in the cartoon cup. Lily came out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Dad, you're up early even for you." "Couldn't sleep." "Is it the airplane people again?" "Yeah." Lily climbed into her chair and picked up her fork. "Did the lady come back?" "Not yet." "She seemed sad." Marcus looked at his daughter. "Sad? You thought she seemed sad?" "Yeah, like she knew she did something wrong but didn't know how to fix it. Like when Tommy Reeves broke my pencil case and stood there holding it and didn't know what to say." Marcus poured her orange juice. "You think she's sorry?" "I think she wants to be sorry. That's not the same thing, is it?" "No, baby girl, it's not. But sometimes wanting to be sorry is where sorry starts." Lily ate her eggs and thought about that. Then she said, Are you going to let her fix it? I don't know yet. You should let her try. Mom always said you should give people a chance to do better, even when they don't deserve it. Marcus felt the familiar sting behind his eyes. 7 years, and Lily still quoted Rachel like she remembered every word. She'd been 2 when Rachel died. She couldn't possibly remember. But somehow through the stories Marcus told and the way he lived and the things he repeated because Rachel had said them first, Lily carried her mother's wisdom like it was her own. "When did you get so smart?" Marcus asked. "I've always been smart, Dad. You just don't pay attention because you're always fixing airplanes." He laughed. She grinned. And for a moment the weight of everything lifted. After Lily caught the school bus, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his phone and called Hank. "I need your advice," Marcus said. "You called at 6:45 in the morning. This better be worth it. Victoria Sterling came to my house last night." Hank was quiet for 3 full seconds, which for Hank was the equivalent of falling out of his chair. "She came to your house, stood on my porch, talked to me, said she wanted to make it right. Full original payment plus additional compensation." "And you said," "I said I'd think about it." "What's there to think about, Marcus? Take the money." "It's not about the money. It was never about the money. You know that." Hank sighed. The deep, rumbling sigh of a man who'd known Marcus long enough to understand exactly what he meant. "Yeah, I know. It's about whether she means it or whether she's just buying her way out of a headline." "Exactly. So what do you need from me?" "I need you to tell me if I'm being stubborn or if I'm being principled, because right now I honestly can't tell the difference." Hank was quiet again. Marcus could hear him pouring coffee in the background, the clink of a spoon against ceramic. "Here's what I think," Hank said finally. "You've already won, Marcus. You won the moment Whitfield refused to fly. You won because the work spoke for itself. The question now isn't whether Victoria Sterling respects you, it's whether you're going to let her prove it. Holding out forever doesn't make you principled. It makes you proud, and pride is just stubbornness wearing a better suit." Marcus rubbed his face with his hand. "Rachel would have said the same thing. Rachel was smarter than both of us combined, and you know it. Call Sterling, take the meeting, but do it on your terms. Not in her office, not in her conference room, not in her world. Make her come to yours." "She already did. She came to my house." "Then she's already halfway there. Let her finish the walk." Marcus hung up and sat in the silence of his kitchen for 20 minutes. Then he picked up his phone and dialed Victoria Sterling's direct number. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been holding the phone. "Mr. Bennett, Ms. Sterling, I've thought about your offer. And I'll take the meeting, but not at your office. Not in a conference room with lawyers and finance people and anyone else who's going to turn this into a negotiation. You and me. That's it." "Where?" Marcus thought about it. "You know Dawson's Aircraft Services small shop on Route 14 about 40 minutes outside the city?" "I'll find it." 10 o'clock this morning. I'll be there." Marcus called Hank back. "She's coming to the shop at 10. My shop. Your shop." "Marcus, my shop looks like it was decorated by a tornado. I've got engine parts on every surface and a coffee pot from 1987. "That's the point." Hank paused. Then he laughed. "All right, I'll put on a clean shirt." Victoria arrived at Dawson's Aircraft Services at 9:58. She drove herself again. No driver, no assistant. She'd left Derek and Sandra and the lawyers at the office over their collective objections. She pulled into the gravel parking lot and looked at the building. It was a corrugated metal structure with a hand-painted sign over the door. 2 small aircraft sat outside a Cessna 172 and a Piper Cherokee, both in various states of maintenance. A cat was sleeping on the wing of the Cessna. Victoria got out of her car. She was wearing a business suit. She realized immediately that a business suit was wrong for this place, but it was too late to change. The front door was propped open with a brick. She walked in. The shop was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like she'd expected at the same time. It was clean, not polished, not gleaming, but clean, the way a workspace is clean when the person who uses it respects their tools. Workbenches lined the walls, organized with wrenches and torque indicators and inspection mirrors. A pegboard held hand tools arranged by size. A small radio in the corner was playing jazz. Hank Dawson stood at one of the workbenches, wiping his hands on a rag. He was tall, thin, white-haired, with the kind of weathered face that comes from decades of working with your hands. "You must be Ms. Sterling," Hank said. "I am. And you must be Mr. Dawson." "Hank, nobody calls me Mr. Dawson except the IRS." Victoria almost smiled. Almost. Marcus is in the back, Hank said. Through that door. Coffee's on the bench if you want some. I should warn you it's strong enough to dissolve a crescent wrench. I think I'll pass. Smart woman. Victoria walked through the door into the back of the shop. It was a larger space, a working hangar really, with enough room for a small aircraft. Marcus was standing next to a workbench, his hands resting on its surface. He was wearing jeans and a work shirt. His tool bag, the canvas duffel, sat on the bench beside him. Thank you for coming, Marcus said. Thank you for agreeing to meet. They stood across from each other. No table between them this time, no glass walls, no audience, just two people in a room that smelled like hydraulic fluid and metal shavings. Before we talk about money, Marcus said, I need you to understand something. I didn't take that job because I needed the work. Hank keeps me plenty busy here. I took it because your letter said nobody else could do it. I took it because I spent 8 years walking away from who I was, and I needed to know if that person was still in there. Victoria listened without interrupting. I found out he was, Marcus continued. 28 days in your hangar, I found out that the engineer I used to be wasn't gone. He was just waiting. And when Patterson told me my work was the best he'd ever seen, I didn't feel proud for me. I felt proud for my wife, because she was the one who believed in me before anyone else did. She was the one who pushed me to get my certifications. She was the one who told me every single day that what I did with my hands mattered. Marcus paused. He picked up a wrench from the bench, turned it over in his fingers, set it back down. And then I walked into your conference room and your finance team told me my work was worth 60% of what you promised. And I thought about Rachel. I thought about what she would say if she knew that I let someone reduce the value of the thing she believed in most. Victoria's throat tightened. She didn't speak. That's why I walked out, Marcus said. Not because of the money, because of what the money represented. It represented whether my work, my life's work, had value. And you told me it didn't. I was wrong, Victoria said. I know you were wrong. The question is whether you know why you were wrong. Victoria took a breath. She'd prepared for this conversation. She'd rehearsed what she would say. But standing in this shop, surrounded by the tools and the smell and the quiet reality of a man who worked with his hands for a living, her rehearsed words felt hollow. I know why, she said. I looked at you and I made assumptions. I looked at where you came from and how you dressed and what you drove, and I assumed that you didn't have options. I assumed that you needed this job more than we needed you. And because I assumed that, I thought I could pay you less, and you'd accept it because you couldn't afford not to. And I was wrong about every part of that. You had options. You always had options. You chose to help us. And instead of honoring that choice, I exploited it. Marcus studied her for a long time. He was looking for the same thing he'd looked for on the porch, the performance, the angle, the strategy. He was looking for the CEO behind the words. What he found instead was something he hadn't expected. He found a woman who was uncomfortable, genuinely uncomfortable. Not because she was being watched or judged, but because she was seeing herself clearly, maybe for the first time, and she didn't like what she saw. Your father was a mechanic, Marcus said. Victoria blinked. How did you know that? Hank told me. Said Richard Sterling started out fixing crop dusters in Oklahoma before he built his first charter company. Said he was one of the best wrench turners Hank ever saw at an air show 30 years ago. Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. He was. He could take apart a Pratt & Whitney engine and put it back together blindfolded. He used to say that the best CEO was one who never forgot what a calloused hand felt like. Did you forget? The question hit Victoria like a physical force. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Yes, she said. I forgot. The room was quiet. The jazz from Hank's radio drifted faintly through the wall. My daughter asked me if you were sorry, Marcus said. I told her I didn't know. She said I should give you a chance to do better. She said her mom always told her that. Your daughter sounds wise. She's 9. She shouldn't have to be wise. She should be drawing airplanes and worrying about frogs in her classroom. But life made her wise early the same way it makes a lot of kids wise early when they lose a parent. Victoria nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. Marcus reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and set it on the workbench between them. This is my original invoice, the full amount. The amount we agreed to before your finance team decided to adjust it. This is what I'm owed. Victoria looked at the paper. She didn't pick it up. She already knew the number. Agreed, she said. Full amount, plus compensation for the delay in payment. I'll have it processed today. I don't want it processed. I want a check. Written by you, signed by you, handed to me by you. No intermediaries, no corporate layers. You made the decision to cut my pay. You hand me the check that makes it right. Victoria met his eyes. I can do that. One more thing. What? I want you to create a policy, a written board-approved policy that protects independent contractors who work for Sterling Aviation from having their compensation reduced after work is completed and accepted. I don't care what you call it. I don't care how you frame it. But I want it in writing and I want it permanent. Victoria considered this. It was a significant ask. It would change how the company operated. It would limit their financial flexibility. It would set a precedent that her legal team would hate. Why? She asked. Because I'm not the first person you've done this to. I'm just the first person who had pilots willing to stand up for him. The next guy, the next independent mechanic or engineer or technician who does exceptional work for your company might not have a James Whitfield in his corner. He might just take the reduced payment and go home and swallow it, and that's not right. Victoria thought about her father again. She thought about him standing next to that crop duster and Oklahoma grease on his hands, building something from nothing. She thought about what he would say if he knew what she'd done. She already knew what he'd say. He'd say the same thing Marcus was saying, because men who built things with their hands understood something that people who only managed money never did, that a person's work was a piece of their soul, and you didn't get to decide it was worth less just because you had more power. I'll do it, Victoria said. Board approval within 30 days. Written policy. Permanent. Marcus extended his hand. Victoria shook it. The grip was different this time, not the practiced deal-closing handshake from the conference room a month ago. This one was real. It had weight. Are we done? Victoria asked. Almost. There's one more thing I need from you, but it's not for me. What is it? Call James Whitfield. Tell him what you told me. He deserves to hear it from you directly. Not from a press release, not from your VP, from you. I've never met Captain Whitfield. Then it's time you did. That man put his career on the line for someone he'd never met because he believed in something bigger than a paycheck. If you want your pilots back, you don't just fix the contract. You fix the trust. Victoria nodded slowly. I'll call him today. Call him now, Marcus said. Use my phone if you need to, but do it now while you still feel what you're feeling. Because tomorrow when you're back in your office with your lawyers and your board and your stock price, this feeling is going to start fading. And if you wait too long, you'll talk yourself out of it. Victoria recognized the truth of that. She'd spent her entire career learning to manage emotions, to compartmentalize, to separate feeling from decision-making. Marcus was telling her to do the opposite. He was telling her that this moment, this raw, uncomfortable, honest moment, was the one that mattered. Do you have his number? She asked. Marcus pulled up Whitfield's contact on his phone and handed it to her. Victoria stared at the screen for a moment. Then she pressed call. Whitfield answered on the third ring. Marcus. Captain Whitfield, this is Victoria Sterling. I'm calling from Marcus Bennett's phone. Silence on the other end. A long silence. Captain Whitfield, are you there? I'm here, Ms. Sterling. I'm just trying to figure out why you're calling me from Marcus Bennett's phone. Because he told me to, and because he's standing right here making sure I do it. Another pause. Then Whitfield let out a sound that was half laugh, half exhale. That sounds like something he'd do. Captain Whitfield, I owe you an explanation and an apology. I know what you did. I know you refused to fly the G700 because of how my company treated Mr. Bennett. I know other pilots followed your lead, and I know that the reason you did it wasn't personal, it was professional. It was about trust. That's correct, Ms. Sterling. I want you to know that Mr. Bennett's original contract is being honored in full. Additionally, I'm implementing a company-wide policy to protect independent contractors from the kind of treatment that Mr. Bennett experienced. This isn't a PR move. This is a commitment. Whitfield was quiet for a moment. Ms. Sterling, I appreciate the call. I do, but I need to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. Go ahead. If the pilots hadn't refused to fly, if the story hadn't gone public, if your stock hadn't dipped and your board hadn't pressured you, would you have made this call? Would you have paid Marcus what he was owed? Victoria closed her eyes. Marcus was watching her. No, she said. I wouldn't have. And that's the part I'm most ashamed of. Whitfield was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice had changed. The guardedness was still there, but something else had crept in, not warmth exactly, but the beginning of the possibility of warmth. Ms. Sterling, I've been flying for 31 years. I've worked with dozens of companies. I've seen good leadership and bad leadership. The best leaders I've known weren't the ones who never made mistakes. They were the ones who admitted their mistakes when it cost them something to do it. What you just told me that took something. I respect that. Does that mean you'll fly the G700? That depends. Is Marcus satisfied? Has he agreed to the terms? Victoria looked at Marcus. Marcus gave a single nod. He has, Victoria said. Then I'll fly it. But I want to meet Marcus first, before the flight. I want to shake the hand of the man who rebuilt that aircraft. I think that can be arranged. And Ms. Sterling, one more thing. Yes. The next time you have an engineer in your hangar working 18-hour days to save your company, buy him a cup of coffee. Ask him about his family. Treat him like a human being, not a line item on a budget sheet. That's not a professional request. That's a personal one. Understood, Captain. Victoria ended the call and handed the phone back to Marcus. They stood in the shop in silence for a moment. Through the wall, Hank's jazz radio played something slow and blue. Somewhere outside, the cat on the Cessna wing stretched and yawned. Thank you, Victoria said. Don't thank me yet, Marcus replied. Saying the right thing is easy. Doing the right thing consistently when nobody's watching, when there's no crisis forcing your hand, that's the hard part. That's where most people fail. You don't fail at it. I fail at it all this time. I just fail smaller. I forget to call my daughter's teacher back. I skip meals because I'm too focused on work. I don't ask for help when I should. Everybody fails at doing the right thing sometimes. The difference is whether you get back up and try again. Victoria looked around the shop one more time. The tools on the pegboard, the workbenches, the grease stains on the concrete floor that no amount of cleaning would ever remove. Your father would be proud of this place, Victoria said. Hank's not my father, Marcus said, but he's the closest thing I've got. As if on cue, the door opened and Hank stuck his head in. Everything's settled in here because I've got a Cessna 172 with a carburetor that's been waiting 3 days, and Marcus, I'm not doing it myself. My knees aren't what they used to be. Marcus looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Hank. Something shifted in the room. The tension didn't disappear, but it loosened, like a bolt that had been over-torqued finally backing off to the right spec. We're settled, Marcus said. Good. Ms. Sterling, you want a cup of coffee before you go. I should warn you, last person who drank it said it tasted like jet fuel. Maybe that's why it's in an aircraft shop, Victoria said. Hank stared at her for a beat. Then he grinned. I like her. She's got her father's humor. Victoria felt something catch in her throat. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected a 70-year-old mechanic in a small shop on Route 14 to remind her of who her father was, and by extension, who she was supposed to be. Thank you, Hank, she said. Don't thank me. Thank that boy right there. He pointed at Marcus. He fixed your airplane and he's fixing you. Least you can do is let him get back to work. Hank disappeared back into the front of the shop. The door swung shut behind him. Marcus picked up his tool bag. He slung it over his shoulder the way he'd been doing for 15 years, the canvas worn smooth where the strap crossed his chest. The check, he said to Victoria. Today. Today, she confirmed, and the policy. 30 days. 20. You got a board meeting tomorrow anyway. Victoria looked at him. Then she did something Marcus had never seen her do. She laughed. A real laugh. Short, surprised, almost involuntary, the kind of laugh that escapes when you realize you've been outmaneuvered by someone you underestimated. 20 days, she said. Marcus walked her to the front of the shop. At the door, Victoria stopped and turned to face him one more time. Mr. Bennett, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. When you were in that conference room and Sandra slid the reduced payment across the table, what went through your mind? What was the first thing you felt? Marcus thought about it. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he wanted to give her the honest one. Disappointment, he said. Not anger, disappointment. Because for 28 days while I was rebuilding that aircraft, I kept telling myself that the work would be enough. That if I did it well enough, if I made it perfect, then everything else would take care of itself. The respect, the recognition, the payment. I believed that excellence was its own protection. And it wasn't. Excellence doesn't protect you from people who've already decided what you're worth before you pick up a wrench. But it does something else. It gives other people a reason to stand up for you. Patterson wouldn't have written that report the way he did if the work hadn't been exceptional. Whitfield wouldn't have refused to fly if he hadn't read that report. The work didn't protect me directly, but it created a chain of trust that eventually did. Victoria absorbed this. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and for the first time since they'd met, she didn't see a contractor or a problem or a headline. She saw a man, a father, an engineer, someone who had lost everything and rebuilt himself the same way he rebuilt aircraft, carefully, precisely, and with a refusal to cut corners, even when nobody was watching. "Goodbye, Mr. Bennett," she said. "Goodbye, Ms. Sterling." She walked to her car. She drove out of the gravel lot and turned onto Route 14, heading back toward the city, toward her office, toward the world she'd built with money and power and decisions that she was only now beginning to question. Marcus watched her car disappear down the road. Hank came up beside him. "Think she's going to follow through?" Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out Lily's drawing of the airplane. He looked at it for a moment. The big wings, the bright colors, the sun with the smiley face. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I think she is." "What makes you so sure?" "Because she reminded me of someone I used to know." "Who?" "Me, 8 years ago. Standing in a hospital room, realizing that everything I thought mattered didn't matter, and the only thing that did matter was whether I had the courage to change." Hank put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. Didn't say anything, just stood there. Two men in a small shop on a quiet road surrounded by aircraft parts and the smell of honest work. Then Hank said, "That carburetor isn't going to fix itself." Marcus put the drawing back in his wallet, picked up his tool bag and walked into the shop. He had work to do. The check arrived at 4:17 that afternoon. Not by courier, not by mail, not by wire transfer to an anonymous account number. Victoria Sterling drove back across the city for the second time that day and handed it to Marcus herself, standing in the parking lot of Dawson's Aircraft Services while Hank pretended not to watch from behind the shop window. Marcus looked at the check, the full amount. The original agreed-upon figure, plus an additional 15% that Victoria had added for what she called delayed payment compensation. Her signature was at the bottom, not a stamp, not a digital print, but her actual handwriting. The pen had pressed hard enough to leave indentations on the back of the check. "It's all there," Victoria said. Marcus folded the check and put it in his shirt pocket. "Thank you. I called Whitfield on my way here. He's agreed to captain the certification flight. Desai will co-pilot. They want to fly the day after tomorrow." "Good." He also asked if you'd be willing to come to the hangar before the flight. He wants to meet you in person. Marcus thought about it. Going back to that hangar meant walking past the conference room where Sandra had slid the reduced payment across the table. It meant seeing Derek and Thomas and the lawyers. It meant stepping back into a world that had looked at him and decided he wasn't worth what he'd earned. But it also meant standing next to the aircraft he'd rebuilt and watching it prepare to fly. And that the moment when the machine you'd put back together with your own hands lifted off the ground and trusted the air to hold it, that was something Marcus had missed for 8 years. "I'll be there," Marcus said. Victoria nodded. She didn't say anything else. She got in her car and left. Marcus went back into the shop. Hank was leaning against the workbench arms, crossed, failing entirely at pretending he hadn't been watching through the window. "She brought the check herself," Hank said. It wasn't a question. She did. "Full amount, plus 15%. Hank whistled low. "That's not standard corporate behavior." "Nothing about the last 5 weeks has been standard. What are you going to do with it?" Marcus pulled the check out of his pocket and looked at it again. It was more money than he'd made in the last 3 years combined at the shop. It was enough to pay off the house, enough to put money away for Lily's college, enough to replace the truck that had been threatening to die for the past 6 months. "I'm going to take care of Lily," Marcus said. "That's what I'm going to do. Everything else is secondary. You could open your own shop with that money." "I don't want my own shop. I like yours." Hank looked at him for a long moment. His eyes were shining in a way that Marcus pretended not to notice, because Hank was the kind of man who would deny he had emotions right up to the moment they overwhelmed him. "Get back to work," Hank said, his voice rougher than usual. "That carburetor's still waiting." Marcus got back to work. That night he told Lily about the check. Not the amount she was 9 and 9-year-olds didn't need to know about amounts, but he told her that the airplane people had paid him what they owed, and that the lady who came to the porch had kept her word. Lily was sitting on the living room floor with her colored pencils working on another airplane drawing. This one was more detailed than the last. She'd added passengers visible through the windows, tiny round faces with different expressions. "So she gave you the good markers?" Lily asked without looking up. "She gave me the good markers." All of them, plus a few extra." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Good. Mrs. Rodriguez would approve." Marcus sat on the floor next to her and watched her draw. She was shading the wing with careful strokes, staying inside the lines with a precision that surprised him. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "When you fixed the airplane, were you scared?" "Scared of what?" "Scared that you couldn't do it, that it was too broken." Marcus thought about this. He thought about day one in the hangar, standing under the G700, looking at damage that everyone said was beyond repair. He thought about the longerons and the pressure bulkhead and the 300 rivets and the 18-hour days and the moments at 2 in the morning when exhaustion blurred his vision and his hands shook, and he wondered if he was fooling himself. "Yeah," he said, "I was scared." "But you did it anyway." "I did it anyway." "Why?" "Because being scared doesn't mean you can't do something. It just means that something matters enough to scare you. If it didn't matter, you wouldn't be scared." Lily set down her pencil and looked at him with those Rachel eyes. "Is that why Mom wasn't scared when she was sick, because it mattered?" Marcus's chest tightened so hard he couldn't breathe for a second. He'd told Lily many things about Rachel, how brave she was, how strong she was, how she fought every single day. He hadn't told her about the fear. He hadn't told her about the nights when Rachel woke up shaking when she held Marcus's hand so tight it left marks when she whispered into the darkness that she wasn't ready to go. "Your mom was scared," Marcus said softly. "She was scared every day, but she didn't let the fear decide what she did. She decided what she did, and the fear just had to come along for the ride." Lily picked up her pencil again. "I think I'm like Mom." "I know you are. And I think you're like Mom, too." Marcus put his arm around his daughter and held her while she drew. He didn't say anything else. Some moments didn't need words. They just needed to exist. 2 days later, Marcus drove to Sterling Aviation's airfield at 6 in the morning. He wore clean jeans and a pressed work shirt, not dressed up, but not the way he'd shown up the first time either. He'd polished his boots, he'd trimmed his beard, he'd packed his tool bag, not because he expected to work, but because that bag was part of him, the same way a soldier carries a sidearm even when the fighting is done. The guard at the gate recognized him this time, didn't ask his name, didn't ask if he was lost, just waved him through with a nod that held something Marcus hadn't seen the first time: respect. He parked in the same spot between the same Mercedes and the same Tesla. His truck still looked like a joke between them, but Marcus didn't mind anymore. The truck ran. The truck got him where he needed to go. The truck had driven him back and forth to this hangar for 28 days while he did the work of his life. He wasn't ashamed of it. He walked into the hangar. The G700 sat in the center of the floor, gleaming under the lights. It looked different now than it had when he'd left. Not physically, he hadn't touched it since day 28. But something about seeing it from this distance, fully restored, standing on its own gear, ready to fly, it hit him differently. He'd built that. Not designed it, not ordered it, not paid for it. Built it with his hands. Captain James Whitfield was standing next to the nose gear, a flight bag over his shoulder, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when Marcus walked in. Whitfield was exactly what Marcus had imagined: early 60s silver hair, the upright posture of a former military officer. He had the kind of face that didn't waste expressions. When he looked at Marcus, his gaze was steady, evaluating, and then when the evaluation was complete, warm. Whitfield put down his tablet and walked toward Marcus. He extended his hand. "Marcus Bennett. Captain Whitfield." They shook hands. Whitfield's grip was strong, and he held it for a beat longer than a standard handshake. "I've been wanting to meet you since I read Patterson's inspection report," Whitfield said. "The man's been inspecting aircraft since before I started flying, and he's never used the word extraordinary in a report. Not once. I checked." "Patterson was thorough," Marcus said. "I appreciated his honesty. He wasn't being generous. I've been flying long enough to know the difference between generous and honest. What you did to this aircraft is honest work, the best kind." Rena Desai appeared from behind the aircraft. She walked over and introduced herself. Her handshake was quick, efficient, and her eyes carried the no-nonsense intelligence of a woman who'd survived the Air Force and the Private Aviation Boys Club and come out sharper for it. "So you're the one who caused all this trouble," Desai said. Marcus looked at her. I didn't cause the trouble. I just built the airplane. Desai smiled. I know. I was testing you. Wanted to see if you'd take the bait. I stopped taking bait about 10 years ago. Smart man. No wonder Patterson likes you. Whitfield pulled Marcus aside while Desai continued her pre-flight checks. Marcus, I need to tell you something before we fly this morning, and I want to tell you directly, not through anyone else. Go ahead. When I refused to fly this aircraft, it wasn't a political statement. It wasn't about making headlines or punishing Sterling Aviation. It was personal. 31 years ago when I started in this business, I was a young pilot who didn't know anything about anything. The only reason I survived my first years of flying was because of the ground crews, the mechanics, the engineers, the fuel techs, the people who put their hands on the aircraft before I ever sat in the cockpit. Those people saved my life 100 times and never got credit for it. Whitfield paused. He looked at the G700 the way a pilot looks at an aircraft, not as an object, but as a partner. When I found out what Sterling did to you, I thought about every mechanic who ever stayed late to fix something that could have killed me. Every engineer who caught a crack that I never would have seen. Every tech who took pride in their work because they knew that pride was the only thing standing between a safe flight and a disaster. Those people are the backbone of this industry. And if a company can treat one of them the way Sterling treated you, then that company has forgotten what aviation is actually built on. Trust, Marcus said. Whitfield nodded. Trust, that's the whole game. Without it, none of this works. Is that why the other pilots followed you? They followed because they understood. Every pilot knows that their life depends on people they'll never meet. The moment you break that chain of trust, the whole system falls apart. Those pilots weren't protecting you specifically, they were protecting the principle. They were saying that the people who build and maintain these aircraft matter, that their work matters, that they can't be treated as disposable without consequences. Marcus felt something inside him that he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't gratitude exactly, though. Gratitude was part of it. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen. Not as a contractor or a problem or a charity case, but as a professional whose work had value and whose dignity was worth defending. Thank you, Captain, Marcus said, for all of it. Don't thank me. You did the work. I just refuse to let someone pretend you didn't. Derek Whitmore appeared at the edge of the hangar floor. He walked toward Marcus and Whitfield with a pace that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Bennett, Derek said, good to see you. Marcus looked at him. This was the man who had laughed when Thomas talked about optics, the man who'd overseen the reduced payment without pushing back, the man who'd done what was convenient instead of what was right. Derek, Marcus said, nothing more. Derek shifted his weight. Listen, I owe you an apology. I should have pushed back on the compensation decision. I knew it wasn't right. I knew it when Sandra presented the adjusted figure, and I knew it when Victoria approved it. I should have said something, and I didn't. Why didn't you? Derek opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Because it was easier not to. Because challenging Victoria's decisions isn't something people do at this company. Because I told myself it wasn't my problem. But it was your problem. Yeah, it was. It was everybody's problem and everybody looked the other way. I'm sorry, Marcus. I mean that. Marcus studied Derek's face. He saw something there that he recognized, the particular discomfort of a man who'd been forced to look at himself and didn't like the view. Marcus knew that feeling. He'd felt it 8 years ago when Rachel was sick, and he'd worked a 16-hour shift instead of being home with her because he couldn't face watching her suffer. He'd carried that guilt for months before he finally quit and went home for good. I appreciate you saying that, Marcus said. I accept your apology. Derek exhaled. He looked relieved, but Marcus could tell the relief didn't go deep. Real guilt didn't resolve that easily. Derek would carry this for a while. Maybe that was the point. If there's anything I can do, Derek started. There is, Marcus said. When the next independent contractor walks into this hangar, the next person who doesn't look like they belong, who doesn't drive the right car or wear the right clothes, don't laugh, don't look the other way, don't let someone else decide what they're worth based on anything other than their work. Derek nodded. I won't. I'm going to hold you to that. I'd expect nothing less. Derek walked away. Marcus watched him go, then turned back to Whitfield. He means well, Whitfield said. Meaning well and doing well are two different things, but everybody starts somewhere. Victoria arrived at 8:15. She came alone again, no entourage, no assistants, no lawyers. She walked into the hangar wearing a blazer and slacks, and for the first time since Marcus had met her, she didn't look like she was wearing armor. She stopped when she saw Marcus standing next to the aircraft with Whitfield. "Mr. Bennett, Captain Whitfield." "Ms. Sterling," Whitfield said. "Jim," Victoria said. "Please, if we're going to rebuild trust, we should probably start with first names." Whitfield considered this. "Victoria, then." "Thank you for agreeing to fly today."
Thank you for giving me a reason to. Victoria turned to Marcus. I brought something. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. She opened it and handed Marcus a single sheet of paper. It was a draft policy document. The header read, "Sterling Aviation Group Independent Contractor Fair, Compensation and Protection Policy." It was 2 pages single-spaced. Marcus read it quickly. It covered everything he'd asked for: guaranteed compensation upon acceptance of completed work, prohibition of post-completion payment reductions, mandatory direct communication between leadership and independent contractors, and a dispute resolution process that didn't require the contractor to hire a lawyer. At the bottom it said, "Proposed by Victoria Sterling, CEO, submitted for board approval." 20 days, Victoria said. "Actually, it took 3. The board approved it unanimously yesterday." Marcus looked up from the document. Unanimously. Robert Langston called it the most overdue policy in the history of this company. Catherine Wells seconded it before I finished the presentation. Marcus held the paper for a moment. Then he folded it and put it in his pocket next to the check he'd already deposited and the ghost of the one before it. "This is good," he said. "This matters. I wanted you to see it before the flight. I wanted you to know it was real. I know it's real. The question is whether it lasts. I'll make sure it lasts. You won't always be CEO, Victoria." She looked at him. That directness again, the kind that stripped away corporate language and got to the bone of things. "No, I won't. But policies outlast people. That's the point of writing them down." Marcus nodded. "Fair enough." The pre-flight preparations continued. Whitfield and Desai completed their checklists. Ground crew moved into position. The hangar doors opened, and the G700 was towed out onto the taxiway. Marcus stood at the edge of the hangar floor and watched. He'd done this before, watched aircraft he'd repaired taxi out for their first post-repair flight. It was always the same feeling, a mixture of pride and terror. Pride because the work was done. Terror because the work was about to be tested in the only way that mattered in the air at altitude, with human lives aboard. Victoria stood next to him. She didn't say anything. She just stood there and watched. Whitfield's voice came over the hangar's intercom system. The pre-flight comms had been patched through so the ground team could listen. "Sterling 700 pre-flight complete. All systems nominal. Requesting taxi clearance." The tower responded. Whitfield acknowledged. The aircraft began to roll. Marcus felt his hands tighten at his sides. Every bolt he'd torqued, every rivet he'd driven, every seal he'd installed, every longeron he'd fabricated by hand, every composite panel he'd laid up and cured and trimmed, every single piece of that aircraft passed through his memory in a rush that felt physical, like the ground was vibrating beneath him. The G700 reached the end of the runway. It turned aligned and stopped. "Sterling 700 cleared for takeoff runway 27. Whitfield's voice came back steady and calm, the way only a 31-year veteran's voice could be in that moment. "Sterling 700 cleared for takeoff runway 27, rolling." The engine spooled up. Marcus could feel the sound in his chest before he heard it in his ears, that deep building roar that started as a hum and grew into something that shook the air itself. The aircraft began to move, slowly at first, then faster. The nose lifted, the main gear left the ground, and then it was flying. The G700 climbed into the morning sky, smooth, clean, strong. No hesitation, no vibration, no shimmy or pull or anything that shouldn't be there. It rose like it was grateful to be back in the air, like it had been waiting for this moment, the way Marcus had been waiting. Marcus watched until the aircraft was a speck against the blue. He realized he was holding his breath. He let it out. Victoria was watching him. "You're crying," she said quietly. Marcus touched his face. She was right. He hadn't noticed. "It's been 8 years since I watched something I built fly," he said. "I forgot what it felt like." "What does it feel like?" Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He didn't feel embarrassed. He was past embarrassment. He was past all of it, the doubt, the anger, the disappointment, the exhaustion. All that was left was the truth. "It feels like proof," he said. "Proof that the work mattered, that all those hours and all that sweat and all those nights away from my daughter weren't for nothing. It feels like proof that I'm still the person my wife believed I was." Victoria didn't respond. She didn't need to. Some statements existed complete on their own, and anything added to them would only diminish them. They stood together and watched the sky. 45 minutes later, the G700 returned. Whitfield brought it in for a landing that was so smooth the tires barely chirped on contact. He taxied back to the hangar and shut down the engines. The aircraft sat on the taxiway, ticking and cooling, and Marcus felt something release inside him, a tension he'd been carrying for 33 days that he hadn't fully recognized until it was gone. Whitfield climbed out of the cockpit and walked across the tarmac toward the hangar. He was smiling, not the polite professional smile of a pilot completing a routine flight, a real smile, the kind that starts in the eyes. He walked straight to Marcus. "Mr. Bennett," Whitfield said, "in 31 years of flying, that is the smoothest aircraft I have ever flown. Whatever you did to that airframe, the balance, the rigidity, the way it handles in crosswind correction, it's beyond anything I've experienced." "It's the same aircraft," Marcus said. "I just put it back together the way it should have been built in the first place." Whitfield laughed, a full, deep laugh. "You're telling me you improved on the factory." "I'm telling you I didn't cut corners. Sometimes that's all improvement is doing the job right instead of doing it fast." Desai walked up behind Whitfield. "I'm filing a report with the FAA recommending this man for a commendation. I don't care if it's unusual. What he did to that aircraft is unusual." "You don't need to do that," Marcus said. "I know I don't need to. I want to. And Rena Desai does what Rena Desai wants to do. Ask anyone." "She's not wrong about that," Whitfield confirmed. Victoria stepped forward. "Captain Whitfield, First Officer Desai, thank you. On behalf of Sterling Aviation, and personally thank you." Whitfield turned to Victoria. "Victoria, I want to ask you something." "Of course." "Do you have a safety conference coming up? An annual event, anything where your people gather?" Victoria glanced at Derek, who had been standing a few yards away. Derek nodded. "The Sterling Aviation Annual Safety and Operations Conference, October, about 3 months from now." "I want Marcus to speak," Whitfield said. The suggestion landed like a stone in a pond, ripples everywhere. Derek looked surprised. Victoria looked thoughtful. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Captain, I appreciate that, but I'm not a public speaker," Marcus said. "I fix airplanes. I don't give speeches." "Marcus, what happened here isn't just about an airplane. It's about how this industry treats the people who keep it safe. Every pilot, every mechanic, every engineer, every technician who works in aviation needs to hear this story. Not the media version, not the headline version, the real version. From you." Marcus shook his head. "I wouldn't know what to say." Whitfield looked at him, the look of a man who'd spent 3 decades reading people from a cockpit and understood more about human nature than most psychologists. "Yes, you would," Whitfield said. "You'd say what you said to me on the phone, that trust holds this industry together, that the people who build and maintain these aircraft deserve to be treated with dignity, that doing the right thing matters, even when nobody rewards you for it. You already know the words, Marcus. You've been living them." Marcus looked at Victoria. "Your conference." "I'd be honored," Victoria said, "if you're willing." Marcus thought about Lily. He thought about what she'd say if she knew her father had been invited to speak in front of thousands of people about the work he'd done. He thought about the drawing in his wallet, the airplane with the big wings and the tiny passengers, and the sun with the smiley face. He thought about Rachel. He thought about what Rachel would say if she were standing here right now watching the man she'd believed in get asked to tell his story to the world. She'd say do it. She'd say do it without hesitation. She'd say that this was why she'd pushed him to get his certifications, why she'd sat up with him at the kitchen table while he studied for exams, why she'd told him every single day that what he did with his hands mattered. Because it didn't just matter for him. It mattered for everyone who would hear the story and recognize themselves in it. "Okay," Marcus said. "I'll do it." Whitfield put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Good man." Victoria turned to walk back to her car, but Marcus called after her. "Victoria." She stopped. It was the first time he'd used her first name.
Thank you for coming back to the shop today, and for the check, and for the policy, but mostly for coming to my porch that night and letting a 9-year-old girl ask you a question you didn't have an answer for. That took more courage than anything else." Victoria stood still for a moment. Then she did something that surprised everyone who was watching, though none of them would ever mention it. She pressed her hand to her chest right over her heart and held it there for just a second. Then she dropped it, nodded once, and walked away. Marcus watched her go. Then he turned back to the aircraft. His aircraft. Not legally, it belonged to Sterling Aviation, to Victoria, to the company. But in every way that actually mattered, it was his. Every rivet, every seal, every longeron, every panel. He'd put his hands on every inch of it. He'd given it part of himself the way every craftsman gives part of themselves to the thing they build. "She's a good airplane," Whitfield said, standing beside him. "She is," Marcus agreed. "You going to be okay?" Marcus looked at the captain, the man who'd put his career on the line for a stranger, the man who understood what trust meant because he'd spent his entire life depending on it. "Yeah," Marcus said, "I'm going to be okay." He picked up his tool bag, slung it over his shoulder, and walked out of the hangar into the morning sunlight. He had a daughter to pick up from school. He had a carburetor to fix for Hank. He had a life to live, small, quiet, honest, and built with his own hands. And now he had a story to tell. 3 months passed faster than Marcus expected. He went back to Hank's shop. He fixed the carburetor on the Cessna 172. He repaired a landing gear strut on a Beechcraft Baron. He replaced a cracked windscreen on a Piper Seneca for a flight school that couldn't afford to send it anywhere else. He did the work the way he always did, quietly, carefully, completely. Lily started 4th grade. She joined the science club. She told Marcus she wanted to build a rocket for the school science fair, and Marcus spent 3 weekends helping her construct a model rocket out of balsa wood and cardboard tubes, explaining thrust and drag and aerodynamics in terms a 10-year-old could understand. "Dad, is this how real rockets work?" Lily asked, holding up the nose cone she'd shaped with sandpaper. "Same principles, bigger scale." "Could I build a real one someday?" "You can build anything you want, Lily. Anything." She looked at him with those Rachel eyes. "You always say that, because it's always true." Life returned to normal, or something close to normal. The check had been deposited. The mortgage was paid off. A college fund had been opened in Lily's name. The truck, Marcus had considered replacing it, but in the end he just had the transmission rebuilt and kept driving it. The truck had earned its place the same way he had. But normal didn't mean unchanged. Something had shifted inside Marcus during those 33 days at Sterling Aviation, and it hadn't shifted back. He carried himself differently now, not louder, not prouder, just more settled the way a foundation settles after bearing weight stronger in the places where the pressure was greatest. Hank noticed. "You're different," Hank said one afternoon while they were working side by side on an engine overhaul. "Different how?" "Can't put my finger on it. You walk the same, talk the same, work the same, but something in your eyes changed, like you put something down that you'd been carrying for a long time." Marcus tightened a bolt and reached for the next one. "Maybe I did." "Want to tell me what it was?" "Doubt," Marcus said. "I was carrying doubt, whether I still had it, whether the years away had taken something from me that I couldn't get back, whether Rachel was wrong about me." "Rachel was never wrong about anything. I told you that at her funeral, and I'll tell you again now." "I know, but knowing and believing are 2 different things. I know the sun's going to come up tomorrow, but I still feel better when I see it." Hank grunted. It was his version of agreement. "And now?" Hank asked. "You believe it now." "I believe it now." October arrived, and with it the Sterling Aviation Annual Safety and Operations Conference. Marcus had never attended anything like it. 3,000 people, pilots, engineers, mechanics, aviation executives, FAA officials, manufacturers, insurance representatives, gathered in a convention center that felt larger than some airports Marcus had worked at. He'd prepared for the speech the only way he knew how, not with a speechwriter, not with a consultant, not with PowerPoint slides or rehearsed anecdotes or corporate talking points. He sat at his kitchen table every night for 2 weeks and wrote by hand on a yellow legal pad. He wrote and crossed out and rewrote and crumpled pages and started over until the words felt right. Not polished, not perfect, right. Lily helped. "Read it to me," she said one night, sitting cross-legged on her bed while Marcus stood in her doorway holding the legal pad. He read it, all of it. 5 minutes of words that contained 8 years of silence. When he finished, Lily was quiet for a moment. "It's good, Dad." "You think so? I think you should add the part about Mom." "What part?" "The part about how she believed in you. You always skip that part, like you're afraid to say it out loud, but it's the best part." Marcus looked at his daughter, 10 years old, sharper than anyone he'd ever met, including the executives at Sterling Aviation, and the board members and the lawyers, and every person who'd ever underestimated him. "You're right," he said. "I'll add it. And Dad, yeah, don't be nervous, just pretend you're talking to me." "That's actually really good advice, Lily." "I know, I'm full of good advice. You should listen to me more often." He laughed, kissed her forehead, and went back to the kitchen to rewrite the ending. The morning of the conference, Marcus put on a suit. Not an expensive one, a simple dark suit that he'd bought at a department store the week before. Rachel had always said he looked good in a suit, even though he almost never wore one. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror and straightened his tie and thought about the last time he'd worn a suit, Rachel's funeral. I was wearing a suit for a different reason now, a better reason. Mrs. Patterson drove Lily to school. Marcus drove to the convention center alone. He parked his truck in the lot between a BMW and an Audi this time, because apparently his truck was destined to always look out of place in parking lots, and walked through the front doors. Victoria met him in the lobby. "You came," she said. "I said I would." "I know, but I wasn't sure until I saw you." She looked at him. "You clean up well, Mr. Bennett." "Don't get used to it. I'll be back in work clothes by this afternoon." She smiled, a real smile, not the corporate one he'd seen in the conference room a lifetime ago. This one reached her eyes. "You ready?" she asked. "No." "Good. The best speakers are never ready. They're just brave enough to walk out there anyway." She led him backstage. Whitfield was there. Desai was there. Patterson the inspector was there. Even Hank had come wearing what Marcus suspected was his only suit, a brown corduroy number that had probably been fashionable during the Carter administration. "You look ridiculous," Marcus told Hank. "You look worse. That tie is crooked. Come here." Hank straightened Marcus's tie with the careful hands of a man who'd spent 50 years aligning things that needed to be precise. "There. Now you look like an engineer." "I am an engineer." "I know, but now you look like one too." Whitfield shook Marcus's hand. "Big crowd out there." "How big?" 3,000, maybe more. Standing room only. People flew in from all over the country for this. Marcus felt his stomach drop. "That doesn't help, Captain." "It's not supposed to help. It's supposed to remind you that what you have to say matters to a lot of people. Use that." Victoria walked to the podium first. The room quieted. 3,000 people focused their attention on the stage. "Good morning," Victoria said. "I'm going to keep my introduction brief because the person you're here to listen to is not me." 3 months ago, Sterling Aviation made a mistake. We contracted an independent engineer to perform what every expert in the industry called an impossible repair on our most valuable aircraft. He completed the repair ahead of schedule and above specification. An independent inspection team called his work the finest structural repair they had ever evaluated. And then this company, my company, tried to pay him less than what we'd agreed. The room was absolutely silent. What happened next changed this company. It changed our policies. It changed the way we treat the people who build and maintain our aircraft. But more than that, it changed me, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend otherwise. The man who rebuilt our aircraft also rebuilt something in this company that I didn't know was broken. His name is Marcus Bennett, and I'd like you to hear his story from the only person qualified to tell it. She stepped aside. Marcus walked to the podium. 3,000 faces looked up at him. He gripped the edges of the podium and looked down at his notes. The yellow legal pad pages covered in his handwriting crossed out and rewritten and stained with coffee rings from late nights at the kitchen table. He thought about Lily. "Just pretend you're talking to me." He looked up. "My name is Marcus Bennett," he said. "I'm an aircraft structural repair engineer. I work at a small shop on Route 14 called Dawson's Aircraft Services. Before that, I worked at Chesapeake Structural Aviation, where I spent 7 years doing heavy structural repair on aircraft most people thought couldn't be saved." His voice was steady, not loud, not dramatic, steady. The same steadiness that had carried him through the conference room when Sandra slid the reduced payment across the table. The same steadiness that had carried him through 28 days in a hangar and 7 years of raising a daughter alone. 8 years ago, I left the aviation industry because my wife was dying and she needed me more than any airplane did. I don't regret that decision. I'd make it again tomorrow. But when I left, I lost something. I lost the belief that my work had value. Not because anyone told me it didn't, but because I stopped doing the work that proved it. He paused. 3 months ago, I was given a chance to do that work again. I rebuilt an aircraft that everyone said couldn't be rebuilt. And when it was done, the company that hired me decided to pay me less than what they'd promised. Not because my work was inadequate, because they believed I didn't have the power to fight back. Marcus looked out at the audience. He could see pilots in uniform, mechanics in work clothes, engineers in business attire. Men and women of every age and background, all of them connected by the same invisible thread, the understanding that aviation ran on trust. But something happened that I didn't expect. Pilots refused to fly the aircraft. Not because it was unsafe, because they believed that the person who built it deserved to be treated with dignity. They put their careers on the line for someone they'd never met, because they understood something that the people who write the checks sometimes forget, that this industry is not held together by contracts and balance sheets. It's held together by the trust between the people who build these aircraft and the people who fly them. Marcus picked up his notes, looked at them, and then set them aside. He didn't need them. Lily was right. He just needed to talk. My daughter is 10 years old. Her name is Lily. She asked me once what holds an airplane together. I told her rivets and bolts and composite panels. But that's not the real answer. The real answer is people. People who show up before sunrise and stay past dark. People who crawl under fuselages and inside fuel cells and into spaces nobody else wants to go. People who do their job right, not because someone is watching, but because someone's life depends on it. He felt the emotion rising in his chest. He let it come. He didn't fight it. My wife Rachel believed in me before anyone else did. She pushed me to become the engineer I am. She sat up with me while I studied. She told me every day that what I did with my hands mattered. She died 7 years ago, and I've spent every day since then trying to live up to what she saw in me. His voice cracked, just slightly. But 3,000 people heard it, and not one of them looked away. I'm not standing here because I'm special. I'm standing here because people like Captain James Whitfield and Inspector Patterson and my mentor Hank Dawson and a CEO who had the courage to admit she was wrong, these people reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That doing the right thing is never wasted, even when it costs you, even when nobody rewards you for it, even when the world tells you that your work doesn't matter because of where you come from or what you look like or how much money you have. Marcus gripped the podium one last time. Aircraft are not held together by metal and technology alone. They are held together by trust between people. Protect that trust. Honor the people who earn it. And never ever let anyone tell you that the hands that build the machine are worth less than the machine itself. He stepped back from the podium. For a moment's silence. Then 3,000 people stood up. The applause started slowly and built into something that shook the room. Marcus stood on that stage and felt it wash over him, not as validation, not as victory, but as recognition. The recognition he'd spent 8 years believing he didn't need and 33 days learning he deserved. Whitfield was the first to reach him backstage. The old captain had tears in his eyes and didn't bother hiding them. Desai hugged him quickly, firmly, the way she did everything. Patterson shook his hand and said nothing because Patterson never said anything when a handshake was sufficient. Hank stood in the corner in his brown corduroy suit and nodded once the way he'd nodded 1,000 times in the shop when Marcus did something right. Victoria was last. She walked up to Marcus and stood in front of him and didn't speak for several seconds. "Your wife was right about you," Victoria said. "I know," Marcus said. "She was always right." That evening, Marcus picked Lily up from Mrs. Patterson's house and drove home. They sat at the kitchen table and ate grilled cheese sandwiches, and Lily asked him how the speech went. "I think it went okay," Marcus said. "Did you add the part about Mom?" "I added the part about Mom." "Did people clap?" "They stood up." Lily's eyes went wide. "They stood up like a standing ovation, like in the movies." "Like in the movies." "Dad, that's so cool." She grinned the biggest grin he'd seen in months. Mom would have been so proud. Marcus reached into his wallet. He pulled out Lily's drawing, the airplane with the big wings and the tiny passengers and the sun with the smiley face. He'd been carrying it since the day she drew it. It was creased now, soft at the edges, worn from being folded and unfolded. He set it on the table between them.
She would have been proud of you too, Lily. You're the reason I do any of this. You know that, right? I know, Dad. And you know that no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says or how the world treats us, we're going to be okay. I know that too. How do you know? Lily picked up the drawing and held it up so Marcus could see it clearly. The airplane, the wings, the sun. Because you taught me, she said. You taught me that if you do the right thing and you don't quit and you care about people, everything works out. Maybe not fast, maybe not easy, but it works out. Marcus looked at his daughter across the kitchen table of their small house on a quiet street, and he understood something that no conference room or corporate boardroom or aviation hangar had ever taught him. True power was never about proving you were above others. True power was building something with your own hands, a career, a family, a life, and refusing to let anyone take away the dignity of having built it. Marcus Bennett was never famous. He never became rich. He never ran a corporation or flew a private jet or stood in a boardroom making decisions that moved millions. He went back to Hank's shop the next Monday. He fixed airplanes. He raised his daughter. He lived a quiet, honest life built on work and love and the unshakable belief that doing the right thing was its own reward. And every morning before sunrise, he made breakfast for his daughter, packed her school bag, and drove her to the bus stop. Because some promises are not meant to be broken, they are meant to be kept every single day for the rest of your life.